Let's bring out our groom. Handsome young lad. All right. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nina?
Lena.
Lena?
Yeah.
I get names wrong all the
It's
time.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Lena? Actually, you can stay there for now. So we have our groom. Now remember, once you get the groom out here, depending on the weather, like here, I think it's like 40 degrees in Seattle, so you probably don't want the groom freezing outdoors. You kind of want to keep him comfortable, relaxed, not too hot, not too cold, not freezing outside, because it is his wedding day and he wants to enjoy the day. We do need some shots of him and his beautiful wife, but we don't want to drive him crazy with the shots and just get him uncomfortable and annoyed and not enjoying his day. We just, right now he's smiling and he's happy, and that's because he's comfortable and he's indoors. So we want to keep him in this zone here. So if it is freezing outside and you're going to do the first look outside, hopefully, I would strongly recommend that you do first looks outside, unless you have a situation, maybe like this even, where you have natural light flooding into the room. Let's say it was freezing outside and the bride was like, no way, I'm doing a first look outside. And you had a situation like this where you had a flood of natural light coming in this room, you could potentially find an area in a hotel, maybe like a beautiful lobby or hallway or corridor in a hotel that's got natural light coming in, and just do it there. I've done it all the time. And you just work with it, because the last thing you want to do is annoy the bride and get the bride upset and uncomfortable and not happy on her wedding day. That's the last thing you want to do. So always be mindful of the fact that even though you want to do all this cool stuff, take care of them. Keep them enjoying the wedding day. Okay, we all want to be creative, but at the same time, we got to kind of cater to our clients. So he's here. If this was outdoors, I would just say, hey, you know what? You can hang out inside. We're going to get you mic'd up, and then I'll use whoever my assistant is for the day. I'll say, hey, stand over here where the groom's going to be. I'll frame up my side shot. Can I grab equipment off the set, Heather? Yeah. I'll get the short little tripod. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay. So I'll generally have a small tripod. It's not big and bulky like this one. It's a very light tripod like the one that I showed during Gear Talk. It's very lightweight. It's very easy just to grab it and go, because it's so lightweight. It probably weighs like 2 pounds. And I can just literally place that anywhere. And the good thing about it is it doesn't have a great head, like a fluid head or anything like that, but I don't need that because it's just going to be a static camera. I don't need to do any pans or tilts or anything like that. I just need it to be a pair of sticks, that I can put a camera on, frame my shot, and leave it alone, because I'm not going to have anybody manning this camera. Now, here's the thing. If you're on a shoot and you're with another creative person, and you have that creative person behind a static camera, you're wasting manpower right now, because that person could have been on a monopod getting a million different shots of this first look, instead of being stuck behind a static camera that's not going to move. You're literally just wasting your opportunities to get more content. So if you have another creative shooter, just get them away from the static camera. Just leave the camera static, frame it up. What do? We're going to check focus, make sure the exposure is on, okay? Checking exposure outside, generally what you want to do is, you want to check your exposure on the whites, because that's what's going to happen. The bride's wearing white, and that's going to get introduced to the frame. Generally, if you can expose off this white, and you're looking okay and you can still see some detail, 9 times out of 10 when the bride comes in, you're going to see some detail and the whites are going to be okay. Remember, it's always safer to underexpose your shots just a little bit than to overexpose them. Because once you overexpose them and the details are gone, they're gone. With these cameras and the compression that these cameras shoot to, the detail is gone. If it's slightly underexposed, you can always bump it up in post. And that's why I have those particular camera settings in my camera, so I can have at least a little bit of flexibility and bump things up in post. Another great thing to do as far as your exposure is to focus on the sky. That's one thing that I always do. Sometimes I don't even have an assistant. So if you have to do something quick, I will expose for the sky, and as long as the sky looks normal, generally when the bride comes into the frame with a white dress, it looks pretty good. It's pretty close. So the sky is a great thing to expose on if you don't have whites. Maybe the groom's just wearing solid black, or maybe he's wearing a different color that's not white that you can't expose on. The sky is a great reference to expose on. And that's it. So we've got our spot. We've got a wider lens on here because we want a medium frame, so we can allow for the bride to come into the frame. So you don't want anything tight on this camera. I would generally, on this tripod here, I'll generally have like a 24-70 because it gives me the ability to either zoom out a little bit, punch it in a little bit, and really compose a really nice looking shot without having to move the tripod physically forward and backward to kind of compose the shot, because that could get kind of tricky. So I love the new Canon 24-70, the version 2. I think it's an amazing lens. I did not like version 1, but version 2 I use a lot. In fact, I just had a wedding in the Ukraine. I shot the entire wedding with the 24-70 and a 70-200 and a monopod. That was it. I didn't even use a tripod at all the entire wedding. So that was a very unique situation for me, this Ukraine wedding, but I literally shot 90% of it with that 24-70. I didn't use anything else. So that is a really great lens. Okay, so here I'll just have my groom like face this way a little bit.
Okay.
And I just want him to be relaxed. I don't want anything that's too stuffy. And if you're relaxed, kind of just put your hands in your pocket, or I just want you to, how would you be relaxed? I'll have you tilt a little bit this way. Yeah, right there, that's fine. You're good?
Yeah.
You feel good? Yeah. So I've got the groom set up. I've got the camera set up. This is going to be static. And I'm just going to have, like I said, I'm going to have a medium composition to allow for the bride to come in. Now, one of the things that I'll tell you is when you frame your shot, don't frame your shot here, right? Don't cut him too close to the frame on the right side, because what's going to happen when he sees, I'm going to have you step out just for a second. If he was here and he saw the bride, a lot of times they'll, and they'll do all this, right? And now they're outside of your frame. So just give them a foot of reaction space, a foot. You don't want too much dead space, but give him some reaction room, because there will be like, oh my God, sometimes there will be a reaction. Like sometimes there's no reaction, like, hey, honey, you look good. Maybe they've been married 4 or 5 times. I don't know, but sometimes they really like, wow, this is, you look unbelievable, but they take a step back just to kind of appreciate the bride's beauty, things like that. So give yourself some room in the frame, and then I'll have you step back. Okay, so this is nice and framed up, and the purpose of this camera here is, when the bride comes up and now she's into your frame, he's gonna face me, right? And then now, hello, honey. I'm sorry to disappoint you, right? He's like, where's my beautiful bride? Now you have his side profile, you have her side profile. And hopefully, in a realistic situation, that would be over here because I'd be shooting with the light. Here, for teaching purposes, we're kind of shooting against the light, so you guys can see, but I'd be shooting this way, and if you looked on this side, the lighting on this side is really, really good. So let's just say for instruction's sake, you had this beautiful light coming this way, you'd have his side profile, you'd have my side profile as the bride, and some beautiful light, which is what you want, nice even lighting on both of us. And now, with a static camera, you get this whole interaction that's going on here. All this interaction, you're getting side profile. And meanwhile, now you can adjust your main camera that you were shooting long, 70-200, and we'll bring that into frame. Can I? Yeah. Okay.
And I just want to remind everyone
Yeah.
that we're just going to be demoing this first look, so we aren't actually
Yeah,
tethered.
so there's no live,
Right.
there's no live view.
So this is for camera angles and things
Yeah.
like that more.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is the main angle here. This is the main angle here, and this is basically just framing him up and capturing the bride's walk. And sometimes they have a short walk, sometimes they have a long walk. And like in the video that we saw, the bride was coming from a long distance, and we were able to with this camera, I was actually able to capture about 13, 14, 15 shots just with this camera as she was making her approach. So now, once he turns, can you turn and face the other way? Once he turns, now I can move a little bit, and now I can really punch in on the bride's reaction, because this is still holding the side reaction, but now I'm going to punch in on the bride's reaction and get her. If you have another shooter, because there's no shooter here, so if you have a second shooter, maybe they're on a monopod, with like a 135 lens or a 100 lens, and they're getting maybe shots of the groom's reaction from the other side, or they're looking for some background. They're always looking to create shots that are interesting, right? Like create shots that are outside the box, that aren't basic looking. You know, you should never be looking for shots that look basic. Even here, when I'm shooting the bride, I'm not looking just to shoot her squared up. I'm using maybe his shoulder as foreground, and maybe I'm just seeing her eyes. You know, I'm playing with the camera a little bit. I'm trying to create shots that are more interesting than just basic shots. So just, you know, even though this is a live moment, still try to be quick. Still try to think outside the box and produce these shots that are stunning. You know, we always want to look for shots that are just visually compelling, and they're different. You know, because you're going to have clients that are going to say, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this before, when they see your work. And you guys have probably heard those comments before, like, wow, I've never seen anything that looks like this. And what are they referring to? Because the wedding was the same. Bride still got dressed, groom still got dressed, there was vows, there was speeches, there was a party, all this stuff. But the way you shot it, that's what looks different, is the way you shot it, and the way that you're maybe able to interact and evoke emotions. And when you put all those things together, you're really creating some special shots. So, you're there, we're going to bring the bride over. You haven't seen her yet, okay. Okay, so I'm going to have you come over here. And the bride's just going to do her thing. Now, I would generally talk to the bride just to say a couple things, because I don't want her to make the mistake of thinking when she gets up to the first look that she has to do something for our cameras, because there are going to be a few cameras there. There's going to be video cameras, there's going to be photo cameras and all that. So it's very important to get her into the zone and really know that when she gets to this first look, it's all about her and the groom. It's not about camera. She doesn't have to do anything special for the cameras. I just want her to be in the moment and just enjoy the intimacy of this situation that she's going to be in right now. So I'll just tell her, I was like, Lena, right? You see, I got that right. After the third time, I got it right. I called her Jamie earlier.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why I did that, but anyways, so I'll tell her, I said, listen, when you guys make contact, just enjoy each other. Just enjoy the moment. You don't have to do anything special for the camera, and that's it. Just have fun with this. Now, you understand that? Mm-hmm. Now, when you get out there, you're going to be looking at the cameras? Mm-hmm. You're going to be just into this guy, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. So she's in the zone right now. Now, the other thing that I'm going to tell her is, this is very important. I'm going to say is like, listen, when you walk up, try and walk up nice and gracefully, because she's so nervous to see this guy. She's going to, you know, and she's going to run up there. But that's going to create a big problem for us. Why? Because we got to focus, and we have to basically follow focus on a moving subject. This is going to create a nightmare for us. So I always tell them, I said, listen, just walk up nice and gracefully, nice and happy, smiles and things like that, and then just make contact. Because if they're walking kind of like this, and you know, it's nice and easy, it's great, because it gives an opportunity here to really dial in the focus. If she's running and I have to catch up to her with the focus ring, it's going to become very challenging. And I might not end up with 13 or 14 shots. I may end up with maybe one if I'm lucky. Now, if there's a short walk, you're going to have to make a judgment call. You know, you're going to say, okay, am I going to be risky and try to get a couple like creative shots, or am I just going to be solid? Now, if you have a problem focusing, and some people do, they can't nail the focus. This is the worst area. This and the ceremony is the worst areas not to nail focus. Like during live moments that you can never reset again, because this moment, once it happens, you can't redo it. It's done. So you have to play it safe. And if you want to play it safe, you might want to start pre-focusing. Like at a ceremony during a procession, it's very difficult to maintain focus on people that are moving. So what you might want to do is, you might want to pre-focus on a spot that they're ultimately going to walk right into your focus spot. Whatever that focus range that you set up, they're going to walk right through it. And at least for a couple seconds, 2-3 seconds, you're going to have a subject that's in focus and then semi-in focus, things like that. So it's always better to have a shot than have no shots, because if you struggled for 12 or 13 shots and you ended up with nothing, you're going to be in a very bad situation, especially when it comes to important moments like this. And that's the great thing about having a side camera, is you're going to basically capture the entire sequence, and you're going to be in focus, because he's not going to be moving any closer to the camera, so the focus shouldn't change at all, and the composition shouldn't change at all. As long as you keep her on the right path, though, because sometimes, you know how it is, She could come to the left shoulder, she could come to the right shoulder, and sometimes we set it up differently. Sometimes we don't even have the groom facing away. We have the groom maybe facing the bride, and I've had him kind of, holding his hands over his eyes or something like that to where he's not turning around. If it's a situation where she's going to have to go up to one of his sides that you predetermine, I would let her know. I said, listen, try to come up, on his left side if you can, because you've kind of already you've kind of like envisioned the way he was going to turn, and that's how you set your cameras and your composition and all that stuff. So just be careful with that. So at any rate, I'm going to have you there, and as she walks into the frame, and I'm just going to have you nice and relaxed. As she walks into the frame, you can walk into the frame and just go straight on him. And then she's gonna be nice and graceful. And then you can turn him around. And yeah, so, yeah. And then you can see, they're just like in love here. They're just in love. And real life situation, they can be saying some beautiful words. He'd never seen her in this dress before. So he's gonna be like, oh my God, you look unbelievable, your dress is beautiful. He's gonna be checking her out. He's gonna be checking out the girl that he's gonna spend the rest of his life with, things like that. So at least for a minute or so, you're gonna have, a lot of content going on. So to be left without a first look is really, like I said before, it's an injustice, because this is a lot of content for a film. So here, if they're not saying too much, because sometimes some couples won't even say too much. They're like, wow, you look beautiful, and just say it, and then they'll just kind of smile. And that's okay. If there's no conversation going on, or there's no interaction or anything, I would start cutting to some more candid stuff. Don't waste time. Just, if there's not, and they're kind of like waiting, like, okay, what do we do now? And you've seen this before, like they're there, and there's like, okay, what do we do now? They're kind of lost in the moment. Just start switching to candids. See what the photographer has planned. And then if he's just switching lenses and, feeding cards and still figuring out what he needs to do, you got to act fast. Have a monopod, have whatever you have, maybe the tripod. And I'll tell her, maybe I can do some live shooting now. Or maybe we'll take a question, and then I'll do a couple live shots.
Okay, great. I think
That
we had a
sound cool?
question in the studio audience.
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
during the static shot, did you have it before in the past where photographers would walk in right before, like in front of the camera, or? Like,
No.
do you let them know?
Very good question. So, nobody should walk in front of your cameras at all, because we're going to work together as a team. And generally speaking, the photographers have these same angles. They have a person on the side, and they have a person that's shooting long. So it should. And I tell them, I said, listen, are you good if we kind of both shoot from the side? Maybe me and your second shooter, and then the primary camera shoot the main angle long with 70-200. And I tell you, I can't even remember an event where they were not good with that. There was one event in particular that I remember, but I was a little bit further away. Were you on that wedding? No, you weren't on the wedding. No, I don't think you were on that wedding. It was out in California. And the side angle, I actually had a 70-200 because I was shooting through a field, and the side shot just looked unbelievable. But the camera was so far away that the photographers just forgot it was there. It wasn't close enough for them to remember, and they crossed, like right in front of the side angle. But it was just too far out. And I did get a few seconds of the shot, and that was good enough. That was good enough. But there shouldn't be anybody in the way for the actual moment when they meet. Now, once the interaction is kind of fizzled, and now the photographer's kind of moving around, it is what it is. Then we need to move around as well. We need to start establishing some other shots and really building as much content as we can before they go into bridal party photos and family formals and stuff like that. Because once they get into that stuff, then you're kind of just waiting around, because they're stuck doing family formals and bridal party pictures and all that stuff. So try to get at least a few candid shots before they do formals and bridal party pictures and things like that, just so you're not waiting around, to get a shot. I'll try to get like solid 4 or 5 shots beyond this, and then generally, I hope the photographer would do candid shooting before formals, that type of thing. So if they do it after formals, then I'll probably just go somewhere else, and maybe I'll get some setup shots in the reception. I'll get some location shots and things like that, just to kill time until they're going to do candid shooting again. So,
Quick question.
yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for what would happen if you have a tall groom? For instance, like your gear here is perfect for these two height, where you can get at shoulder level or maybe even a little bit above. But what happens when you have a guy who's 6'5", 6'3", and your tripod's not going up high enough to be able to see the bride's reaction over the way you're framing it? Do you just change your direction?
I had a better situation.
Okay.
I had a basketball player that was 7 feet tall, and the bride was 5'1". Yeah. How do you deal with that? And they did a first look. And I was still able to frame them in the same side shot, just a little bit further back, a little bit wider. The front angle, even for me, I'm 6'2", 6'3", and I struggled for first look with this guy. I was literally like as high as I could possibly go, trying to get the groom shot. But sometimes you just got to make it work. But that framing, yeah, it was pretty tricky. It was pretty tricky.
Ray, how important to you is the 180 rule? I'm just curious, do you just shoot what you think looks best when it comes to first look? Are you even taking that into consideration? I'm just curious about that.
Well, here I'm following the 180. I always follow the 180, but here's what you got to remember. If you don't have a shot for whatever reason, the rules go out the window, because you cannot not record a shot because you're worrying about a 180 rule. Like, the bride's not going to want to know that, you know, if you would have got that particular shot, you would have violated the 180 rule, things like that. So you didn't take the shot. That doesn't fly. So there's going to be situations, especially during ceremonies, which is where you really want to abide by the 180 rule. Here, we're always abiding by the 180 rule. But at the ceremony in particular, there's going to be instances where you just don't have a shot because there's so many people, they're so congested. We do a lot of Jewish weddings, and in a Jewish wedding, they have this huppahs that they get married under. And a lot of times under the huppah, they have the bride, the groom, both sets of parents, a rabbi, maybe 2 rabbis, a cantor, a best man, maid of honor, you know, all these people. And the huppah, a lot of times, is not that big. So how do you have like a shot of the bride or a shot of the groom when they're exchanging vows? Sometimes you don't have one. All you have is people's shoulders and heads, and you just don't have a lane to shoot through. And our rule for us is, if you don't have a shot, do whatever you got to do to get a shot, period. If it means ditching the tripod and grabbing a monopod and a 50 lens and just standing there like this, just so you have a shot of whatever you need to film, you got to do it. If you don't have a shot, the worst thing you can do is stand in a spot for 30, 40 seconds, missing something very important, just because you wanted to follow like a 180 rule or things like that, or you're waiting for the situation to correct itself, which is never going to happen. So the worst thing you can do is sit there for a minute, 2 minutes, waiting for that situation just to correct itself when it's never going to correct itself, when you could have just taken 5 seconds and just done what you needed to do to get the shot again, get that shot rolling again, especially if it's a very important shot, vows, ring exchange. You know, you never get stuck in a situation where you're missing a shot. And if you just moved, who cares if you violate the rule? You know, we try not to violate the rules, of course, because visually, it's not visually pleasing to the eye and things like that when you're watching the film. But, you know, in the end, it's all about capturing the moments. You know, that's really what we're hired to do is capture this thing. And it's not like commercial work or corporate work where we kind of really control everything and make sure that we're not violating any 180 rules. This is a live event, you know, and see, the most challenging thing about this job is you either captured it or you lost it forever. And that's tough. That's a tough job that we do. You know, we're a special breed. You know, if you want to get into this industry, I mean, you're just a special breed of person because it's very challenging, it's very stressful, and you have to deal with these different types of situations. But to answer your question, we always try to abide by the 180 rule, but in an instance where we just don't have a shot because we're trying to abide by the 180 rule, the rules go out the window. We make the adjustment and we get the shot. And I'll generally have a 70 to 200 on here, but since I have the 100, I'll just kind of deal with this. And Lena, you can just look this way here. Yeah. So here, if you have the 70 to 200, you don't have to physically move the tripod forward and back. You know, if you have a prime lens on here, you're kind of forced into adjusting forward or backwards. But if you got a zoom lens on there, it works a lot better. So here, and you can kind of just face me a little bit, right there, and shift over this way. Yeah, that's good. So here, remember, you always want to check focus, and this is going to be pretty tricky because I'll try to do a rack focus, from Lena to Jamie. And these are really just beauty shots. And then just look beyond me, so you're not looking at me, just like that. And nice and happy. Yeah. So she's nice and happy. Remember, and you're nice and happy back there, Jamie? Yeah. Yeah. Just like that. Did you see that? So these are just, they're really just natural reactions. All I said was, just nice and happy, and they automatically lit up. Okay? And I can also adjust this to where, maybe I'm shooting something like this. And here when you're doing rack focus, it's a little trickier because you don't have that check focus option. That type of thing. So I'll just get a couple little candy shots. You can even shoot her bouquet here. That type of thing. You can do pans. And you can even work off her shoulder. Let's see. Whatever kind of looks good to you, because creativity is going to come from within, right? So we're going to compose shots based on how we're feeling that shot, But the main thing is the lighting always. Nice and happy back there. Okay, remember, get them in the zone. If you're rack focusing back to Jamie, and he's kind of looking serious, like he's not too happy, just kind of get him in the zone. Just nice and happy. Just check and lean out. There you go. And then I can rack focus back to her. And just a couple different candy shots. Now remember, back to the first look, what I'll generally do is, especially if you don't have a lot of shots with the groom, because generally at the first look, this is the first time that I've seen Jamie on the wedding day, because I don't do groom prep. So this is literally like my first interaction with Jamie, and I haven't had the opportunity to get any shots of Jamie. Now Jessica has, but I haven't. So when he's standing out here and waiting for the bride to make her approach, I'm basically getting some shots, and I'll have you come over. And you can step off back there. Actually, I'm going to change lenses real quick. Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Ray?
Yeah.
People in the chat room had asked about, this is from JDD, who had asked about, so we have the static camera on the side, you're shooting on your tripod, and then your wife is also shooting from the opposite direction. How many cameras are on the first look total? Is it just the two?
It's just two of us physically.
So it is you and Jessica,
Yeah.
and the static and the side camera.
And the static camera.
So 3
And
cameras.
we just really started doing that recently.
Okay.
She used to be kind of just like the main angle, and I would just frame up the side camera and leave it. But recently, I've become the main angle. We've had the side angle, and then she's been grabbing her monopod just for some additional content and trying to find shots that are, like I tell you, outside the box, a little bit different, shooting through some foreground, maybe doing some rack focuses, and really just creating more content for us is what she's looking for. Rather than one of us just standing around doing nothing during the first look, she's actually become like an active shooter.
So you don't have one getting the groom's face and one getting the bride's face?
Yeah, she'll
Okay.
get the groom's face if she's part of the first look, depending on the situation. Because what happens is, if he's here and he turns, here, turn like to face Lena, like there, and say she's getting his reaction here, I may be in this shot now, that type of thing, or I may be in that shot. So it's very tricky. Sometimes there's like a column, or maybe there's some trees you can kind of conceal yourself behind, so you're not visible to the other cameras or photographers. That works out great. So sometimes it's just a little bit tricky getting the groom's reaction, that type of thing. Yeah, and usually you can see between that main angle and the side angle, that motion of him seeing the bride, you're actually able to see his reaction pretty good. Not like a tight close-up shot like you have of the bride maybe, but certainly from the side angle and this angle here, you're able to capture some of that. All right, so just stand there and just nice and relaxed. And I always tell the groom just to get him in the zone. I just say, listen, just nice and relaxed, just stand there, think about your girl, just to get him in the zone visually. Yeah. Yeah, so the good thing with this is you can punch in and get different shots. As opposed to having the prime lens on here, you can kind of get what you need. Now remember, I always check focus just to make sure everything's tack sharp. You know, so you can just start composing shots. You can pan up, nice and relaxed. There you go. And now, Lena, can you come up sort of behind him? Yeah, right there. So now, let's say she was getting ready to make her walk from there. Let's say the walking distance wasn't so great. If she was just there, I could just tell her, I said, you know, Lena, hold on. Just hold on there before you start your walk, because this is a great little shot that I can take before they do the actual first look. So I could be here, and the first thing I want to do, I want to check focus on her, because it's more important to be tack sharp and focus on her than when I do this little rack focus back to his boutonniere. And you're nice and happy just looking over at Jamie. There you go, nice and happy. And then I just come back here, and you'll miss it a little bit, and then I go back here, and nice and happy. And then back, and then now you can start your walk. And I can come back to her. And you go ahead, you can tap them or whatever. You can turn around, just see each other. And then I'll right focus to her, get her reaction. Perfect. Perfect reaction. And remember, don't get tunnel vision to where you're just stuck on Lena. You know, pan down a little bit. See what her hands are doing. You know, maybe they're joining hands. You see the bouquet, you can pan back up. And just try to get as many shots as you can with this main angle. But right now, the actual main angle is going to be the side angle, because side angle is getting both side profiles, getting all the interactions, all the motions and things like that is being captured right here. So if you do have an active shooter that's got a monopod, now's the time to kind of bounce around. You can get his reaction, get her reaction, start shooting more stylistic shots with foreground, reflective surfaces, and things like that. But be fast, because this whole interaction here is probably going to last like 30, 40 seconds max, you know, maximum, before they start looking at you for some type of direction. Thanks, guys. You guys did awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, did awesome, looked great. Yeah, appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Yeah, helping me out.
No problem.
All right, man. And congratulations on your marriage.
Thank you.
I hope it lasts a long time.
Yeah.
And you look happy. Both of you look happy, so that's a good sign.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, cool. We happy for them? Yeah. All right. Everybody kind of get the gist of what we do for the first looks? It's kind of, let me tell you, most of the stuff that I do, it's very basic. I don't try to do anything that's difficult or overthought or anything. I just try to think of lighting, number one, camera position, number two, and the way things are going to fall into my shots. And that's how I kind of compose my shot.
It's cool when it's such a kind of like, it has to, you need preparation, but at the same time, it is like capturing that specific moment. You'll never get that again. So it is a really fine line between having everything in order and then letting it flow naturally.
Yeah.
I mean, that is really the test of the first look.
Yeah. And it's a very compelling moment. And I tell you, it's content that you wouldn't have had otherwise. You know, if you would have let this go, and maybe you would have let the traditional bride just be a traditional bride. And sometimes, let me tell you, I have weddings that don't have first looks, and it's fine. It's the way that it's going to be. You know, it's just going to be a wedding with no first look. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's still going to be a beautiful wedding. Now, is it going to be as content loaded and maybe as compelling as the wedding where they maybe had personal vows and first looks and more speeches and things like that? Probably not. You know, so that's why I try to, and you should offer them these suggestions on things that are going to make their film be great, but it's their choice to either take your suggestions or not take your suggestions. You know, maybe they have their own way of thinking when it comes to their wedding and stuff like that. You don't want to mess with that, you know, so it's a very delicate thing, especially if it's really traditional down south, North Carolina. That's where you're from? Yeah, so maybe it's not time to change things in North Carolina yet, but eventually, maybe things are going to start changing, because you know what's going to happen? Some North Carolina bride is going to watch some wedding film of yours probably that's got a first look in there, and maybe you're going to set the trend. in North Carolina. Single-handedly, you could change things in North Carolina. It happens because I tell you, even in South America, unheard of. First looks, unheard of, because most of the people are, Catholics and stuff, and there's no way that, they're going to be seen before that wedding ceremony at the church, and they're doing first looks in South America now. So times are changing, things can change. You can set new trends. You can inspire brides with your work, and get them thinking differently.
This is from Tim Tom, and Tim Tom had asked this earlier, but how do you handle microphoning the bride? So Tim Tom says there's no information on the internet for this. Like, who places the mic on her? Do you place the mic on her? Do you have your wife do it? Where you put the mic? And I know you must have some white lavs, obviously, to be able to do
Tomorrow, we're going to cover all audio for ceremony.
this. Sweet.
And that's where we do mic the bride, and I'm going to explain micing the bride tomorrow.
Perfect. Okay, well, we'll save Tim Tom's
So he's
question.
going to have to join us tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, there you go.
And it's going to be a
That
great
sounds good.
segment.
That we'll look forward to that. All right, do we have any questions in the studio audience, you guys? Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned before the first look happens that you would have the groom mic'd. You said you're getting the groom in place and then you put a mic on him. At that point, you mentioned earlier that there were wired mics, wireless mics.
Exactly.
And then the venue may have a mic or the DJ may have a mic for him later. But do you put both mics on him at that time?
Just one. We just use the Olympus recorder that I showed earlier. We just use that because it's small, it's fast. You can just put it on them, take it off them. We don't use a wireless, and there's really nothing to tap into with a hardline connection to a soundboard or mixer. So we definitely use the recorders. Anything that's going to happen fast, even a quick speech, like a surprise speech, we'll have a lav and a little Olympus recorder ready on standby just in case somebody decides to stand up and you don't have time to maybe get the proper audio that you would have if you've been given better notice. But yeah, we use the Olympus recorders for first looks and pretty much everything else. They're just so handy. They're very reliable. They don't have any interference. But like I tell you before, for ceremony, you will find, if you are using wireless mics, you will find, if you don't have the interference, that the quality of the sound that you're getting from, say, like Sennheiser wireless, it's a lot richer than what you get off the recorders. Yeah, but the recorders are great. They're great. You just being picky, I would choose the Sennheiser audio during a ceremony over, say, like a recorder, if I had it. But as a last resort, I would take the recorder audio at any time, because it's pretty good audio. Yeah.
Okay, Ray, I really got one from Fashion TV this time. During the first look, we noticed there was a lot of emphasis on the bride. In your opinion, what percentage of that focus should be the bride, or do you sometimes mix it up between who's getting most screen time?
For the first look?
For the first look, sir.
Well, let me tell you this. It's all about the bride. So the primary focus is the bride. The bride is the beautiful one, okay? And this is her day. And the bride is what's going to really captivate the audience. The groom is just the groom, So he's part of the wedding for sure, a big part of the wedding. We're going to show the groom. But honestly, in the end, that's why we spend so much time with the bride, is because it really is all about the bride. It's the bride's day. She's the one with the big white, beautiful dress. And so, yeah, the primary focus for sure is going to be on the bride. Second to that, obviously, is going to be the groom. But if I have my choice, between a bride or a groom shot, I would take the bride shot, hands down. Because and most of the words spoken on a wedding day are about the bride. They'll introduce some stuff about the groom, but mainly they're talking about how beautiful the bride is as a person, and this, and her outer beauty, and this. So, if given the choice between one and another, I would always choose the bride stuff. If I can have both, obviously I have both. But if given the choice, I'll definitely gravitate towards the bride stuff. Yeah.
Ray, I'd like to know a little bit more about how you communicate with Jessica during the wedding day. Do you guys talk to each other via your own mics, or do you do hand signals? How does that work?
We don't really talk much at all. Yeah, we got a system down, So we're at an advantage, probably like Diana and Alex. when you're working together week in and week out and you're going home together and you're viewing stuff together, there's just such a system that gets put in place to where communication on the day of, with walkies and things like that, I don't feel as though we need it. Now, there are certain times of the day, like for the ceremony, we do have certain hand signals that we'll use for certain things, and they're not like official hand signals. They're just kind of hand signals that, we've come up with. Just to let each other know, hey, get a little bit of this. I'm solid here in the center. And we'll get into that for the ceremony coverage. But during the early part of the day, we don't really have any communication. The only communication we'll have is, like I told you before, if there's going to be like a gift exchange or something's going to be exchanged, or they're going to run something from bride preps to groom preps where she is, I'll kind of give her a call and I'll just give her a heads up. The only drawbacks to having like a walkie-talkie system and things like that, especially like for a ceremony and things, is that it's generally quiet, and that little mumbling that you're doing and the whispering, you're probably being heard by somebody. So we just kind of, like I tell you, we have a couple hand signals that we use, and that's generally good enough. Is a couple hand signals that we use, and I'll get into that tomorrow. And maybe sometimes you'll just come up with your own type of signals. Now, I've been on shoots where they have had little microphone systems and things like that, and it was very useful, because there's a lot of times where I've needed something and I was hoping, maybe Jessica was going to turn and look at me, or my assistant, and they don't, and I really needed something for that particular shot. So there is a huge advantage to be able to communicate with your team during a shoot. So I'm not knocking that at all. I just tell you, for me personally, our team, we've never gotten into it.
So there was a conversation going on in the chat room, and Wilson Philo, as well as Vivid Images, I believe, we were talking about, I heard recently a wedding cinematographer, pulled all of the stills for an entire wedding album from the video that they shot, like making photography kind of obsolete at that point. So what do you think about the future of that, of taking stills from video? Do you have any thoughts on that topic?
I will tell you this, and I've said this before, if you're a photographer and you're worried about a videographer pulling frame grabs from his video and looking better than you have some work to do. Because we can't replace a great photographer. I could never in a million years replace a great photographer. In fact, I even had the mother of a bride ask me one time, she said, Ray, your stuff looks so great. Can't we just pull stills from your video and make an album? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I cannot replace a great photographer. No way, no how. And I don't even want to put myself in that situation to where I'm thinking like, oh my God, not only do I have to cover the wedding with video, I've also got to be responsible for the photography. And I tell you, once you get into a low light shooting situation with these cameras and try to pull frames from a bad lighting situation, it's not going to be the same. And the resolution's different. You're not able to, you're not going to be able to print these images really big. If you keep them small, yeah, you could probably, some frame grabs are going to look better than some photography that's out there. But for the most part, you're never going to be able to replace a great photographer, much the same way that a photographer is never going to be able to replace a great videographer. So I never get too concerned with that. I never get concerned that my job's going to be over one day because now photographers are now shooting video and things like that. I just think that you're going to have a hard time being great at both. Being a great cinematographer and a great photographer at the same time, at the same wedding. It's too much to do. It's too much responsibility, and I don't think anybody should ever worry about that. And if you are worried about that, that just means that you have a lot more work to do with your own craft.
Well, I think it's awesome just to hear, your respect for photographers in the industry,
definitely.
and then also asking for respect for yourself as a videographer in the industry. So I think that relationship is always a little bit interesting, and people have a lot of questions about it. So.
Yeah.
It's good to hear it's good to hear you say that.
Yeah,
So
I think
appreciate it.
sometimes, if you get into these events and you're concerned with, photographers kind of, messing up your thing, trust me, photographers are worried about videographers messing up their thing. So, it kind of works both ways. And, there's photographers that act out of line and there's videographers that act out of line. So on both sides, we both deal with the same types of situations. Trust me, I've seen the photos. I have photographer friends that send me, iPhone photos. Oh my God, look what I got to deal with today. And I look at it and I was like, I feel embarrassed because these video guys are really just messing up the entire shoot. And vice versa, you know, we've all seen shoots where photographers show up and act much the same way, just lack of consideration and things like that. But if you work like a team, I've always found that in the end, you're gonna come up with the best stuff. And the person that's gonna benefit the most out of that is the bride. Today we're going to talk about ceremony and reception coverage. This is going to be very, very important. Just as important as being efficient and evoking emotions and getting all this creative content that we did yesterday. The most important thing at the ceremony is going to be what? Besides your composition and your lighting and your camera work. What do we start to get into now?
The importance of the vows.
Exactly. But our audio and recording audio, this is going to be critical for us because like we said yesterday, a great film with no audio is a bad film. A good film with great audio is very watchable. A great film with no audio is not very watchable, okay? So audio is going to be number one. So on my team, general rule is as soon as my assigned audio person, which is Jessica in my case, gets to the church or the reception, her number one task is acquiring audio acquisition. Find a mixer, find a soundboard, or if you don't have one, maybe you're inside of a church and you don't have access to a soundboard or a mixer, you have to start finding the officiant, the rabbi, the priest, whoever it may be, and then also the groom. You also need to think about pre-planning. Are there going to be readers at the church? Where are they going to speak from? Or sometimes you may be in a church where the priest doesn't allow you to mic him up, but he's going to be doing a lot of speaking from, say, the podium. So maybe you can mic up the podium or at least have a source of audio coming from the podium. Are there going to be musicians? Are they paying a lot of money for the musicians? Are they going to want to hear these musicians later on? You have to think about these things. Do they have a singer? Is the singer related to them? Sometimes at a ceremony, unless you ask, you don't even know that one of the singers is the bride's sister or her aunt or her grandparents or something like this. So always try to pre-plan, ask questions. Is there anything special that's going to be happening at the ceremony that we need to know about audio-wise? Give yourself time, because even though we're in bridal preparations and we're trying to get all this content and be creative and all this, we're trying to keep the bride on time. And I tell my brides, I say, listen, we need time to get set up at the church. And if you're running too late during bride preparations, there's going to come a point in time that I'm going to have to leave, period. Because the ceremony and the exchange of vows, it's really what it's all about, is the exchange of vows and the ring exchange and all that. And I can't show up to the ceremony 2 minutes before, 5 minutes before, and expect to get properly set up with all the audio. So tell the bride an hour. If you're lucky, maybe you get 30 or 40 minutes. But at least give yourself that 30 minutes. Sometimes we have 15, 20 minutes, but at least we have 15, 20 minutes. And that's with me telling them I need an hour. So just imagine if you didn't tell them you need an hour, you'd probably have even less. So it's very important. Besides audio, what are we concerned with at the ceremony? Solid shooting. Don't forget this. We're going to employ tripods at the ceremony, especially if you have an outdoor ceremony. Don't try to do this, with a shoulder rig or on a monopod or handheld even, because you're going to be battling your equipment the entire time because it's going to be windy, maybe the ground's uneven because you're on a beach, and you're trying to hold this shot for 25, 30, 40 minutes, and it's not going to work out. The shot's going to move everywhere. It's going to be distracting. And remember, as a videographer or cinematographer or filmmaker, whatever you want to classify yourself as, you never want to draw attention to yourself from the viewer. You never want the viewer to think of you as the videographer. So if they're watching this very compelling film and the camera's moving all over the place, now they're going to think of you. Now they're going to say, oh my God, can't this videographer just hold the camera still? Things like that. So it disrupts the flow of the film. So never do anything that's going to draw attention to you, the videographer, even with your film technique. So tripod for most everything that includes dialogue, ceremony and speeches, remember, we're on a tripod. Now there are instances where you have the flexibility where, say you have 1 or 2 cameras locked down on a tripod for the ceremony, and maybe you have a third shooter or like a third active videographer that maybe grab a monopod and start getting some cutaways, some B-roll and things like that. And we'll get into that when we get into the live shooting. We must mic the officiant. And obviously we're going to mic the groom. But I've been to so many churches where the priest or the officiant, they tell me in all their 30 years of doing this, not once have they been asked to be mic'd by a videographer. And it blows me away. Some of you might have heard the same thing from a priest or an officiant, and it blows me away because the most important person to mic up during a ceremony is the officiant. The officiant speaks 90% of the time. Even though you have the groom mic'd up, the groom's limited. He's only going to speak for the vows and the ring exchange. The officiant speaks 90% of the time. So if you only had one person to mic up, it'd probably be the officiant, or you're going to lose all your audio. So always mic up the officiant, always mic up the groom. In our case, we've started miking up the bride because what happens, and you guys have experienced this, the groom has the mic on and you're relying on the groom's mic to pick up the bride's vows and ring exchange. What happens if they're outdoors and there's wind and it's on the beach and there's waves crashing and there's birds and the obvious wind noise that's going to be out there? What happens if she's soft-spoken and you're still relying on the groom's mic to pick her up? The audio is just not the same. The groom's feed is going to sound great, but as soon as you get into post-production and you listen to the bride's audio, you're like, oh my God, I have to add some gain to this. And as soon as you raise her levels, you're also raising all that unwanted noise that you don't want. So it's never the same as, say, like the direct feed or the officiant's feed or the groom's feed. I'm very fortunate that I have a female on my team, which is Jessica, and I use her to place the mic on the bride. I don't know what you would do if you didn't have a female on your team because it would be very difficult to place the mic on the bride. There are ways around this, and I know some teams that don't have females that do this. One of the ways is, and I'm not sure if I have this with me, but if I do, I'll show it to you. There's actually a strap that you can tuck a little mini recorder in, but you'd have to rely on the bride to actually feed the mic up before she's getting into her dress. And then that way, during the ceremony, you can make the adjustment on the mic. For us, we have a simple Olympus recorder like the one that I showed yesterday. And Jessica just simply slips this in to the front of the bride's dress. Right on the inside, you don't see the lav mic, you don't see the recorder, and it just slips in. And generally, the bride's dress is so tight, fitted, that there's no risk of the recorder actually slipping down. And it really gives you great audio from the bride. So not only do you now have great audio from the officiant and the groom, you also have great audio from the bride without having to raise her levels or add gain filters or anything like that, where you're going to be also raising all this unwanted noise. So it is something to think about because you are going to achieve greater results with your audio if you do that, or if you can find a way to do that without kind of invading the bride's space or upsetting the bride. We always check with all our brides, and I let them know. I says, listen, if we can put a mic on you, your audio is going to sound every bit as good as the groom. Every bit as good as that audio that you hear in some of our films, and the bride automatically thinks, oh my God, I don't want my audio not to sound good during the vows and the ring exchange and things like that. So it gets her thinking, and she's a lot more accepting to the idea of being mic'd up and things like that. And it's not, and like I said, it's nothing that you can see. It's nothing that's visible. It's just giving us a clear advantage to get better audio. Now, what's the difference between the different recorders? You have the wireless, you have the recorders like the one I showed you yesterday, the Olympus that we use, and you also have the direct feeds. And what are we looking for? We're looking for the best audio, right? But if the best audio doesn't work because of, say, like a wireless, catching interference, an RF hit right during the vows, which is generally our luck. The RF hits generally come right during the vows when we don't need the RF hits. And then we have the direct feed. And hopefully the direct feed is going to be the best feed because, like I told you yesterday, they're speaking directly into the source most times. So I'm going to actually let you listen to the different sources from one wedding that we had so you can hear the difference of each feed that we had. We had a wireless going, we had a direct feed, and we also had an Olympus recorder. So the first one here is the direct feed. Take a listen to this.
For the Bible says it like this: love is patient, love is kind. Love never boasts, it's never puffed with pride. It never acts out of rudeness or insists upon its own way. It never rejoices in evil, but only always rejoices in truth.
Okay. And then the second one you're going to listen to is the little mini recorders, the Olympus.
For the Bible says it like this: love is patient, love is kind. Love never boasts, it's never puffed with pride. It never acts out of rudeness or insists upon its own way. It never rejoices in evil, but only always rejoices in truth.
Okay. And then the last one we're going to listen to are the Sennheiser, the wireless kit.
For the Bible says it like this: love is patient, love is kind. Love never boasts, it's never puffed with pride. It never acts out of rudeness or insists upon its own way. It never rejoices in evil, but only always rejoices in truth.
Okay. So you'll notice the Sennheiser gave us the richer tone. The Sennheiser. But the Sennheiser is the riskier. Yes, go ahead.
Do you remember which lavalier was used with each recorder?
The same one, Tram TR50s.
Perfect.
Yeah, Tram TR50s. So it's an even test. The Sennheisers had the Tram, and the Olympus had the Tram, and then we had a direct feed. The direct feed was not the best. It's very acceptable. If you didn't have any other source of audio, the direct feed's fine. If you didn't have any other source of audio, the Olympus was fine. But if you had the Sennheisers, it did give you the richer tone without having to go into post and kind of mess with the EQ filters and things like that. It just gave you the richest tone. And sometimes the direct feed is going to give you the better tone than what you're getting from your wireless. So it just depends.
And your Sennheiser wireless pack was transmitting to a recorder. That recorder was your Edirol 4-track?
Exactly, the R44, the Edirol R44. Very important when you go to these events is to, like I told you before, assign one person to take care of all your audio. Because what happens is, if you have a team of two or three people, for you it's a little easier because you're just by yourself in that regard. But if you have a team of 2 or 3 people and you have a situation where there's a little bit of confusion as to who is supposed to record the audio, you might end up with no audio. And then at the end of the day, you can point all the fingers, but the reality of the situation is that you just have no audio now. And now you have a huge, huge problem to deal with. So what I did was, I made Jessica my audio tech, my sound engineer. I just says, you know what, from now on, you are 150% responsible for all audio. So there's no confusion, and I'll set up the lights, I'll take detail shots and location shots and all this. I just want you to do my audio acquisition for not just the ceremony, first looks, receptions, all the speeches, wherever audio is involved, it's her task. And if something goes down, I know where to point the blame, that type of thing. And I'll still lose. I'll still lose that battle, but at least I'll know where to point the blame. So very important, please assign one person the task of audio. Everybody has to know their role. Same thing like I told you yesterday. If you have a couple of creative shooters, guess what? Somebody has to be solid for certain parts of the day, like speeches and ceremony. Just make sure everybody understands their role, because at the end of the day, it has to be all about teamwork. If you want to achieve the same goal, it's got to be all about teamwork, and everybody has to know their job and kind of execute the plan. They can't run off and kind of do their own thing because that wasn't part of maybe your plan. I'm going to show you a clip here, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
And I remember when Amber was a baby, Lauren and I would lay in bed and talk about this day as if it would never come. And here we are. And I don't think it could be any better, and it's certainly better than we ever imagined. And we're so happy. I would not want to change a single thing about Dwayne. If I had to place an order for the qualities in a man for my princess, it would be Dwayne. I see him as a perfect match for my daughter to have and to hold, to protect and to prosper with. Dwayne, I trust you and give to you my and Lauren's most valued treasure in our lives, Amber.
Can you believe it's Saturday? It's wedding time. It's wedding day. Wedding day. We've been waiting all week, and this week flew by.
Dwayne and Amber, on many occasions, the both of you have told me that you are each other's best friends. And on this day, your wedding, like Jesus, you lay down your life for each other. That now, in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, in a love that is patient and kind, that believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Dwayne and Amber, you are called to give and to give.
I, Dwayne Anthony McLaughlin, take you, Amber Nicole Ridinger, to be my wife.
Dwayne, I love you without knowing how, why, or where it all comes from. I love you with this overwhelming love that sometimes I can't even fully understand. It radiates through every inch of me, in everything that I do, in every thought, and in every action.
I give you, and only you, my deepest love. A love that has taken my entire existence to create. I will forever cherish and honor you, for God Almighty has opened my heart.
Dwayne and Amber, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife.
Don't clap. How did it look? How did we do? How do we do for preps? All our efficiency, all our content that we gathered throughout the day? Did everything look perfect? It wasn't. We had a huge problem at this wedding. You know what it was? Everything went perfect. We did our bride prep perfect. We had some candid shots. Had really good audio from the dad. The ceremony started, and it was going on, and somebody at the wedding complained that they were too hot. The problem at this wedding, that structure that they got married under, It was a tent. And they had generators running everything. So they turned on the generators just before their vows. And the generators were deafening. So guess what happened? We lost all our audio. How did the audio sound in the film? Pretty good?
It sounded amazing. They were talking really quietly, and you felt like you were
It sounded
sitting right
amazing.
next to them.
Exactly.
Amazing.
We had no audio. We recorded all that audio the next day. Exactly. The mother of the bride who's sitting in the first row could not hear the vows. That's how loud the generator was. So what I'm telling you is, even though we all want to reach this level, do all these high-end events, do these spectacular events like this, they come with a lot of work, and they come with a lot of expectations, because I couldn't have just left that event with bad audio, right? Because what would have happened to the film? I would have had no film. With all those amazing visuals, I would have had no film to deliver to this client. The expectation was too high. So I had to make a command decision right away. And I had to say, I have no audio. I need audio. I'm going to have to talk to this couple. So I spoke to the couple, and I says, hey, guys, you heard the audio. The generator came on, and the bride told me right off the bat, she goes, my mother was crying because she could not hear our vows. I said, exactly. So the bride said, what can we do? I said, we're going to have to do a re-record tomorrow. Okay? Doesn't matter what time. Just party tonight, rest up tomorrow, anytime, I'll be in your room. But here's the key. Remember what we talked about yesterday? About doing what? This was very important. Evoking emotion. Did I have to get them back in the zone or what? Back in wedding zone. Because now they've already gotten married, they've partied, they're tired, they're maybe hungover, and now they have to reread vows. What kind of zone are they going to be in? Not the wedding zone. So what I did was I got them both in a room, and it was their room, it was their suite, and I said, guys, sit on the bed. I need you guys to sit across from each other and look at each other in the eyes. And when you read these vows, I need you to read it with the same conviction that you read it yesterday, and even mean it more than what you did yesterday. And that's how I kind of got them back in the zone. And I had already listened to the vows, so I already knew kind of what the pacing was. And as soon as I got them back into the zone and I was able to evoke these natural emotions, I didn't have to do a retake. It was almost spot on the first time. But the problem is, in the edit, if on the wedding day they were very emotional, as you could see, if in the re-record they were like, I take you to be my wife and whatever, just, get out of here. We want to rest. We want to go eat. In post, it would have created a nightmare because, number one, the audio would have never matched up to the visuals, and it would have created so much work. Now, obviously, there were some words that were slightly off, but nothing that you couldn't adjust in post very easily. So the main thing is learn to be able to make these command decisions. Yes?
What was their attitude like towards you? Were they mad that they had to come in the next day, or they were totally
Absolutely
agreeable?
not. This was something that was 100% beyond my control, and this was all about them and their film. So if they didn't do it, it wasn't on me anymore. And I tell you, when you're dealing with this types of clientele, and I tell you the expectations are so much higher, if something like this would have happened, and I would have left with bad audio, when I had the opportunity to get good audio in a re-record, they might ask me, why didn't you just ask us to do a re-record? We would have done it again. And if I didn't do that, now it's on me. But the fact that I'm asking them and I'm making them aware of this bad situation, I'm kind of covering my tail at that point. So if they don't do it and they say, you know what, go with what you got, we don't care, we don't want to do it, now it's their problem with the film. They can never come back after me because I have covered my tail. So get in the habit of covering your tail. It's very, very important. Even with lighting situation. What happens if I let a bride do her makeup and hair in a bathroom and she looks bad because she's got all these shadows and orange skin and all this, and she doesn't look as beautiful as maybe one of these brides in one of my blog posts or one of my films? What if she comes back and says, why doesn't my skin look as great as these girls in the other films? I said, well, you know, your makeup artist had you in a bathroom. Well, why didn't you just ask us to move? There was plenty of light coming into the room. So believe me, guys, these will come at you. So please cover your tail. If you have the opportunity to make something either look better or sound better, it's up to you as a professional, and it's our responsibility to make the move, to at least make the suggestions. Say, listen, by the way, based on my experience, I know this, if we move over here, you're gonna look a lot better, or if we do this, it's gonna sound a lot better. Just always tell them it's gonna look or sound better if we do this, and offer the suggestions. I don't order anybody to do anything. It's their decision whether or not they wanna accept my suggestion. 99% of the time, they accept the suggestion. You never want to upset them or kind of push your ideas on them or anything like that. Just offer the suggestion based on your experience and training, and that's all you can do. So, I wanted to show you that clip because I want you to know that I don't live in a perfect world. Far from a perfect world, because the expectations are very high and the margin for error is very small. When you're at that level and you want to do these high-end events, the margin for error is very small. They're not expecting you to tell them that you've made a bunch of mistakes with their wedding film. I mean, it's just not something they want to hear. So be very, very careful. But in the end, it all worked out. And you guys couldn't tell that it was a re-record, which is great. And they knew it was a re-record because they actually did the re-record, but their family and stuff, they don't know that it's a re-record. So it all worked out. And then now you have, and actually, I ended up with better audio than if the generator wanted to come on, because now I've got them in my controlled environment running my own audio. So that audio ended up being so much better than the actual audio that I would have recorded, even without the generator problem. I also had them read some other things. You know, this groom, funny enough, he was donning a naval uniform, and he wasn't in the Navy. He wore that uniform to honor his grandfather, who had just passed away. His grandfather was the first African-American deep sea diver in the United States Navy, who was portrayed by Cuba Gooding Jr. in the movie Men of Honor. That was his grandfather. So in the main feature, the main film, if you looked at it, he was actually flipping through his cell phone photos, and there's actually photos of his grandfather next to Cuba Gooding Jr. on the movie set and things like that. So it was a very, very cool story with this couple. Very important to know what type of ceremony you're going to deal with, especially when you're talking non-denominational, Catholic, Jewish, Indian. You need to know what kind of ceremony you are, because, for instance, a Jewish ceremony, the bride stands on the opposite side. So you may plan for just a traditional non-denominational wedding where, you know, the bride's on the left side, but now she's going to be on the right side. So you have to adjust the cameras accordingly, and your primary shooter has to make the adjustments accordingly. Establish a bride cam at all times. Like we talked about yesterday, you shoot by yourself. What's your primary focus during a ceremony? If you had to have a shot, what would it be?
Normally, my primary focus is I have a camera in the middle aisle shooting up, like a more dynamic shot, and that's my primary camera. And the camera I'm personally using moves between the groom's side and the bride's side, depending on vows and who's talking and those types of things.
So when they're doing the vows, will you actually swap to the other side for the groom vows, or will you stay on the bride's side?
I'll swap to the other side.
Okay, so you'll move. Typically, what do you guys do, Alex? You're two shooters.
Well, we usually have 3 cameras, and so one central camera, middle camera,
of course,
and will be one camera covering the groom and the bride from the other side.
Okay.
And probably sometimes fourth for just a B-roll or just like you said, what's the creative shots and looking for emotions from the guests.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you only had one camera,
but
if you were only allowed one camera at the front, who would you cover, the bride or the groom?
Well, usually, I don't know, I would say we would, well, bride, yes, of course, but
if you had the center camera,
yeah, center camera, just covering them both.
Both?
Yes, that would be the safe
But the tight shot, the close-up shot up front, if they only allowed one camera, which one would it be?
I would try to shoot both, I think, like just middle camera.
Somehow, some way?
Yeah. No, I mean, like if it's a middle camera.
No. You still have the middle camera.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
But they give you a choice to have only one camera close to the front.
Well, yeah, bride.
You be on the bride.
Yeah, if if she'll be more emotional.
If she's more emotional.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I wanna.
You better have that camera on the bride.
Yeah.
Because this is all about the bride. That's my point. And you know, I have some churches where I come from. You're only allowed one camera by the altar, and that's it, and one camera in the back. So you have your center camera all the way in the back, and they allow you one camera up towards the front. And we always try to establish a bride cam, you know, because generally the brides are a little bit more emotional. Well, sometimes we get grooms that are a lot more emotional than the bride, but generally it's the bride, and the bride looks beautiful, and the center camera has both the bride and the groom anyways. But we always try to establish a bride cam. So my primary shooter at the front is always established on the bride at all times. Because the groom cam, when do you need the groom cam? Vows and ring exchange, and that's it. But that bride cam, now you can kind of fluctuate between the officiant, the bride, and maybe some cutaways. So we're going to get into camera coverage here in a few seconds. Anticipate. Very important to pay attention during a ceremony and communicate with your team. Have signals, or maybe some of you guys use, do any of you guys use communication devices or no? Nothing. We don't either. We just hand signals, right? So like my signal with Jessica that we've kind of come up with is to avoid both cameras moving at the same time, things like that, is whenever you see us with our hands down to our side, that means that's like a signal for you to move and make your adjustments and zoom in and do whatever. And as soon as I see her with her hands to her side, I know I can move and I can recompose a different shot. So that's kind of our little visual reference, you know, to let each other know, hey, it's okay for you to adjust your camera or recompose your shot. Avoid 3 angles of the same subject. This gets kind of, this creates jump cuts in your edit. You know, when you have the groom cam, the bride cam, and the center cam all pretty much compose the same, and in the edit or in the film, you're just, you know, cutting between camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 2, camera 1, camera 3. You know, and it's really all just the same, it's just the same content, pretty much the same compositions and things like that. So if you have a center cam going, maybe the bride, maybe your camera 1 is shooting some cutaway shots, because there's always some emotions going on at these ceremonies. So this is another important reason to not try to film on a monopod or handheld or with a shoulder where you're kind of battling to just maintain stabilization, because you're concentrating so much on the stabilization where you're losing sight of the people that are actually there. If you have the camera on a tripod, now you can compose a shot, make sure it's in focus, good composition, and now you can kind of just scan the room. And if you see somebody that's a little bit emotional, maybe tearing up a little bit, or if they're getting ready to applause, you know, for the kiss, now you can kind of turn your camera and get that shot, you know, for 3 to 5 seconds. We apply the same rule during the ceremony for cutaways as we do for everything else, for preparations, for candidates. It's 3 to 5 second rule. So if the camera's here on the officiant, nicely composed, and we turn and we see some emotions going on, and it's not that important what we have here, and the center camera has it covered anyways, now this camera will turn and 3 to 5 seconds start plugging away at the parents. Because it's always nice while you're playing the ceremony to be able to kind of tell the viewer what was going on in the room. You know, who was in the room, what was their emotional state, things like that. So that's why you want these B-roll cutaway shots. And remember, we're looking for content. We're always looking for content. For the ceremony, it's a little bit limited, right? Because everybody's pretty much motionless, and it's really all about the bride, the groom, and the words being spoken at the ceremony. But there's other things that are going on, such as people's emotions. So, and it's always good. When you create these films that are 20 minutes, what's our obligation to the clients? Go ahead.
Our obligation is just that we're going to create a high quality film and give them exactly what they hired us for, what they anticipated.
Exactly. But they want to feel as though they've seen everything, right? And they want to feel as though they've seen everybody. So what do you do during the ceremony? There's accountability. because they're not going to remember everything that happened on the wedding day, but they're certainly going to remember who was there, right? If there was a reading done by a sister, they're not going to remember all the words spoken by the sister, but they are going to remember that the sister read. If grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and all these people are there, they're going to remember that they were at least at the wedding. So what we do is, like when I cover bridal preparations, I don't film hair and makeup for everybody that's in the room. It's really all about the bride, because all these other people are going to come into play at some point in time, whether it's during hair and makeup, maybe they come up to the bride, they interact a little bit, or maybe they're helping the bride with her dress, maybe they're saying beautiful words to her, maybe they're preparing a gift, maybe they're preparing a speech. So I'm showing all these bridesmaids in the film, and I'm basically being accountable for all these people that showed up to the wedding. So I don't necessarily have to show maybe the grandparents at the ceremony because I've already shown them during bridal preps, or maybe the grandparents spoke at the reception, so I don't have to show them so much earlier in the day. As long as these people appear in the film at some point, because there's no rule as to when they're going to appear. As long as they appear at some point, and you got to remember, the film is about the bride and groom. It's not about the aunts and uncles, the neighbors, the friends, the cousins, and things like that. Yes, they will show up at some point. Maybe they'll show up when they're dancing, things like that. But they'll show up at some point in the film, so you don't get the complaint later on where I didn't see my aunt anywhere in the film, and she was at my wedding. You know, you don't want that type of complaint. So just remember, it's all about accountability. You know, if you didn't get them early in the day, try to get them later in the day, things like that. Okay. This is a typical ceremony setup, correct? You have the bride on the left, groom on the right, you have your guests, and you have your officiant. I want to talk to you about procession coverage and how we cover this event. This is our setup for every wedding. For every wedding, this is our exact same setup. And as you can see here, we're not violating any 180 rules here. We're all along the 180 rule line. And like I told you yesterday, if you're ever in a situation where you just don't have a shot, forget about the 180 rule and just make sure that you record the moment. Camera one is generally me, and I'll be back there with a glide cam. And this is just to, when you have the glide cam or steady cam, if you have one of these devices, it's really for tracking moving subjects. And during a procession, what do you have? You have moving subjects. So it's a great time to employ, if you have one, a glide cam. But like I told you yesterday, you don't really need these tools. They do raise production value. Certainly during a procession, it makes sense to use something that you can track subjects with. But if you just have a solid camera on a tripod with a solid shot, it's going to be just as good, because it is a very special moment when they do this procession. So camera one's going to be me. I'm going to be back there just trying to track subjects. You'll notice I'm going to be out of the way of camera two, which is Jessica. Jessica's on a 70 to 200, and her responsibilities is the procession, the groom reaction, and some reactions from these people in the front. I can't get the reactions because from back here, all I have is the backs of people's heads. So she's in a better position to get those types of shots. Camera three, and we'll see this later on, is just an unmanned camera that I use right next to Jessica on a very small tripod. This camera serves a couple different functions. Number one, it's going to cover Jessica. Because Jessica's covering me, I'm trying to do a creative shot, which I may mess up and lose the shot, and hopefully she's going to get the shot. If she is not able to maintain focus, and we talked about this yesterday, it's very difficult to maintain focus manually on a moving subject that's coming right at you. It's very challenging. I'm hoping Jessica's going to be able to nail the shot, and she normally does, like 99.9% of the time, she's able to do it. A lot better than I ever could. That's why she's up there. The only thing that I need in the edit is 2 to 3 seconds of the person making the procession in focus. Just 2 to 3 seconds, and it's a usable shot in post. If she's not able to do that because maybe they just walked too fast or they ran down the aisle or something like that, I'll always have camera 3 available, that footage, and I'll always pre-focus maybe like on the 3rd or 4th row or 3rd or 4th pew. And at some point, the good thing about that lens, number one, I'll either use, I'll generally use a 14 lens, a Canon 14, and that lens shoots a lot flatter. So it's not got the same shallow depth as, say, like, you know, a 51.2 or a 35 or something like that. So even though they're not tack sharp and focused back here, you can still see them pretty clear, unless you zoom in and things like that. But what I do is we pre-focus here about the third or fourth pew. So at some point, they're going to walk right into focus. So you're guaranteed a shot that's going to be in focus of this very important moment of the procession and ultimately the bride coming down with her father, whoever's escorting her down the aisle. So that's why we have camera number 3. I'm going to show you visually, I'm going to show you some clips here of camera number 1 right now. So that's camera number 1. And then camera number 2 is a long lens. This is going to be Jessica, 70 to 200. And that's all I'm looking for, is just 2 to 3 to 4 seconds. Now, if Jessica wasn't able to maintain focus, I've got camera number 3. It's not the greatest shot in the world, but it's very, very acceptable. Okay? Teamwork. It's all about teamwork. If everything comes together, this is what a procession should look like. As you can see, Jessica does a lot more work than I do. I had one shot, she had like 8. Okay.
What wasn't the maid of honor and the grooms, or the maid of honor, they also were a wedding that you shot?
Very good. Very good. That means you've been watching the
I told you
the
I watched
site.
like 20 videos last night.
Actually, I shot, this bride was that groom's sister. So I've shot both weddings down in Brazil. And they're all videographers. Really? These are all videographers that I shot their wedding down in Brazil. So I'm doing the whole family. Right. And very, very nice family. I mean, Brazil's wonderful and the people are just amazing down in Brazil. Okay. That procession that you saw was in a perfect world. But we don't live in a perfect world. Because in that wedding, there was perfect lighting. It was nice and even. But what happens if there's mixed lighting? Right? And it's not so even. You have very harsh lighting. You have hot spots. You have shadow spots. What do we do then? What did we talk about doing yesterday? We talked about exposing for the bright spots. Don't expose for the shadow areas because then you're really going to blow out the bright spots. So this wedding here, you're going to notice there was a lot of trees creating a lot of shade, but then there was spots where the sun was actually coming through and creating a very difficult situation for us. So what we did was we exposed on the bright areas, of course. And I just wanted to show you this. Same setup. And the other challenging thing about this one, this was the monkey wrench that they threw. They said, not only do you have to deal with this mixed lighting situation, the bridal party's not even going to come down the center aisle. So we showed up, we said, okay, what's going to happen? Well, the groomsmen, they're going to come around the side of the ceremony area and come up to the front and then assume position. And then the bridesmaids are going to come around this side, right? And then the parents are going to come like not even down the center, like off center. Alex, you were there, right? This was like huge. You remember this? They like came around the sides. So we're like, okay, so now we have to deal with this mixed lighting situation, and they're not even going to come down the center aisle. So all the stuff that we planned for them coming down the center aisle just went out the window. And this is what the shots were looking like and how we were able to kind of adjust to the shots. This is just raw shots. So everybody get the groom there. And this is the bridesmaids coming off one side. And you see how we're using the background as a canvas. We're using it as a canvas. If you can do that, then you can expose for the shadow areas. But on the groom side, it was a little bit difficult because we didn't have that. This was off the groom side. And you can see how we're exposed for the bright spots. Here I had to expose off the bright spots. Here we had a problem. This was not a great shot for the bride. So now the front shot of the bride is going to be the main shot that we're looking for in the edit. And here's how it looked in the film. So we had the groom there. Cutaway shots, like I told you. Always be mindful of those. There's some first look stuff in here, but just ignore that because some procession stuff's going to wrap up right after. You can see how the first look stuff comes together as well. And then back to the procession. And that was extracted from a film, so that's why you're seeing all the extra visuals. Groom reaction, main camera, 70 to 200. So even though you have the difficult lighting, there's always ways to, not only the difficult lighting, but the monkey wrench of having the grooms come up one way and the bridesmaids come up the other, totally ignoring the center aisle, right? Which typically, yes, sir.
The most common monkey wrench that I've run into is that both your cameras 2 and 3 are right in front of the groom's mother. It's right at her knees as she's sitting in that front row on the aisle seat. How do you be respectful to the parents in that front row?
Of course.
During the processional while moving 2 cameras around in the front?
The camera 2 is generally right next to the main photographer. So, and they try to make themselves as small as possible while they're up there. We'll take a look at that later on today. The camera 3 is really a situation where, yeah, sometimes it's almost right next to their leg. And a lot of times when I'm setting the camera, I will talk to the grandparents. And I said, listen, I'm trying to get this beautiful shot of your granddaughter as she comes down the aisle. You know, I emphasize that I'm trying to get this beautiful shot of the granddaughter. It's not about me, it's about your granddaughter, which it is. It's all about the bride, but you need to emphasize that it's not me. It's not me. We're just trying to we're trying to get your granddaughter here. I want to get this beautiful shot of your granddaughter as she's coming down. If you can, try not to bump the camera so that way it doesn't wobble as she's coming down the aisle. Okay, and trust me, they don't move this camera. Now, I did have one particular situation when I first got the Canon C300, right? And I don't even shoot weddings with the C300 anymore, and this is probably why. I made the mistake of using my C300 when I first got it as my camera 3 for the procession. So as I'm in the back with camera 1 and the glide cam, I'm seeing Grandma go down the center aisle. And I'm just looking at her as she's walking directly towards the C3. She's off center now, right? Like off center of the aisle. And I was like, oh God, please, veer left, veer left. And next thing I knew, my brand new C300 was literally taking a nosedive, along with Grandma's cane and everything. So that was the last time I ever had my C300 used for camera 3. Luckily, camera 3 is low to the ground, so it didn't have that far of a drop. But I still had a mini heart attack.
Little heart attack. Hey, Ray, a quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When Jessica's shooting that 7200, is she doing any rack focus, or
sure
she is doing? Okay, I wanted to understand that.
Whatever she has time to do. Now, if you notice that clip that she did the rack focus from the bride to the groom, how far away was the bride coming from? Like 2 miles. So she had so much time to really get in there and compose different shots and get creative. Because you're still looking for the content. Remember, if you have the time and you can squeeze out that 3 to 5 second little creative content that you can tuck away, do it. But sometimes you just have a very short aisle and you don't have room to play like that. So she would have never had time to sit there and get creative rack focus from the bride to the groom or anything like that. So really, it's dependent on how much time you have, how short the aisle is. We have some aisles that are just a mile long, so then we have so much time to get cutaways, shots of the groom, shots of the bride, a rack focus. You know, I'm not doing it, she's doing it. So she's actually doing a lot of work up there, which is good.
Oh, it's really beautiful. But so as they're walking down, she's trying to catch that bride right in the middle of the aisle. She's just holding one sort of focus spot,
Exactly.
hoping that they're going to be walking slow enough to grab that 3 seconds.
Yeah, and I coached the bride. I asked her, I said, listen, when you walk down, try to walk nice and gracefully. I also coach the bridesmaids, especially if they're walking by themselves. They get nervous. So they're just like, they're speeding down the center aisle. And it really creates a big problem for Jessica, because now she's going to have to try and maintain focus on somebody that's really walking fast, or literally, sometimes kids run down the center aisle, and there's just no way. And that's really when the camera 3 comes into play. And the camera 3 is at the kid level. So it's great. You know, it's right here. Sometimes she can obviously maintain the focus, but sometimes they literally just run down the center aisle because they're just so nervous. But at the end of the day, the client's still going to ask you, hey, where were the little flower girls and the ring boys that came running down the aisle, things like that. So you always want to have something that's going to cover you, especially with these cameras, because like I told you, these are risky cameras to shoot with. You know, battling exposures and focus, it's very challenging with these cameras, so you have to be prepared for bad situations. So we talked about the procession. Now let's talk about the actual ceremony coverage. During the procession, you notice that Jessica was here. The only thing that Jessica does to transition from procession coverage to actual ceremony coverage is just transition from there to here. And she actually makes that transition when the bride's about 6 or 7 feet from completing the procession with her father, whoever's escorting her, because then there's going to be the giveaway, and she can't be here anymore. She's got to move out of the way. So she's going to transition from here to here, which is where she's going to stay for the remainder of the ceremony. So it's perfect. She's going to transition right here. She's going to get the giveaway that's going to happen right there, and then her primary function is going to be a tight shot of the officiant, who's going to speak for the most part about 90% of the ceremony. Vows and ring exchange, her primary focus is going to be a tight shot of the bride. And we're going to go through this. And then obviously if she has the time, she's going to get some cutaways of reactions and family members that are in, especially the first couple rows. Usually the first couple rows at a ceremony are your major players. Close family, close friends, I mean people that you can just assume the bride's going to be asking to see in that film. There's the first couple rows. As a general rule, the first couple rows, those are the major players at these weddings. Once we're done with camera 3, which was the safety camera, I'm going to pull it back, and that's going to become the center aisle camera. Alex, you saw all this, right? So, yeah, Alex can tell him about it. He knows that everything that he's seeing here actually happens on an actual wedding shoot. Go ahead.
I just heard this idea, and I want to hear your opinion. Some people put like 2 cameras in the middle. One will be covering like close up, and the second camera will be staying like next to it. Would be covering like wide shot.
There's a wide shot, of course.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
It's perfect. And actually, you remember the wedding that we had? There was an obstruction in the center, so we didn't have that same capability. But what I do is, since this camera 3 is becoming the center camera, I still have my camera from camera 1, which is from the glide cam. And that'll generally be the wide angle camera that I'll use for slider shots or more creative shots, or if it's a Jewish ceremony and they're breaking the glass, I'll use that as the wide shot to get that, but I still have a tighter medium shot for the center aisle. Let's take a look at, now the groom camera over here. The only time that we employ the groom camera is for the vows and the ring exchange. That's the only time that I need that camera over there. Once the vows and the ring exchange are over, I don't need that camera over there. If I have a third active shooter, I want them getting cutaway shots. You know, help me out with cutaway shots, because I have to be accountable for some of the people that are here. And a lot of times, Jessica's here, she's only got like a close range to the people on the right side. If I have a third shooter, they've got close range for B-roll and cutaways of the people on the left side. So it's a lot easier. Here is camera 2 during vows. Nice tight shot. Good composition. Remember what we talked about? You can see a little bit of her dress there. If I didn't show at least a little bit of the fabric, it almost gives off this idea like, oh my God, is the bride even wearing anything? Is she even wearing a dress? Even though we have good composition, head and shoulders, if you can't see at least a little piece of that fabric, remember that when you're composing these shots, because sometimes, even though you have good head and shoulders, good composition, it just looks kind of odd because it's kind of just cut off. So be very careful. Good composition. Camera number 2 during the vows. My center camera during the vows is here. And you'll also see a wide creative shot right here. With a wide camera, you'll see what, so I have a tighter shot, but then I have a nice wide shot. There's another tighter shot. So even though you're in the back and the center, don't get tunnel vision. Don't just sit there like, oh, okay, I have a center camera, I'll just maintain the center camera and then that's it. Try to move around. If you have some foreground, if you have anything that you can use to create more interesting shots, do it. It's well worth it. You know, here I had beautiful architecture. The ceiling was great. I had candles. I had the slider, I had a wide angle. And it's just here I had the candles. I was using it with a 135 lens. And it just creates imagery that's outside of the box. And it's different from just a lockdown center shot, right? A lockdown center shot, remember, is what every videographer is going to do. Just they're going to film the obvious. We never want to look for the obvious. If there's something that we can use to create a shot that's more interesting, we want to do that. Jewish and Indian ceremonies. Have any of you guys done Jewish or Indian? A couple of you? 3? They're a lot of work. So it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a longer ceremony, especially Indian ceremony. It's going to be a lot longer. There's going to be a lot more work involved. So make sure you're charging accordingly, because I can tell you right now, you're going to have a lot more footage to deal with in post. And you're going to be sitting there with about, especially an Indian ceremony, Indian wedding, 2-3 day event, you're going to be sitting there with about 2-3 times the amount of footage of like a regular simple beach ceremony, you know, with 50 guests. You know, you're going to be sitting there with about 3 times the amount of footage. So just make sure that, you know, you're compensated accordingly. Pre-planning is critical, especially for a Jewish ceremony, because like I told you yesterday, they get married under a huppah in most cases, and there's so many people under this huppah, and a lot of times the huppah is not even that big. So you remember the diagram for the typical ceremony setup? This is a typical Jewish ceremony setup. You'll have a huppah. You're going to have a couple sets of parents on each side. You're going to have a rabbi. Sometimes you're going to have 2 rabbis. You'll have a cantor. You'll have the best man, the maid of honor, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen. You have the bride and groom. And your other monkey wrench here is that the bride and groom face away from your center camera almost the entire time. And even when they kind of face each other to exchange vows, a lot of times they don't face each other all the way. But this is the situation that you're dealt most times. And the problem here is that if you're trying to shoot through the sides here, you generally have the parents that are blocking you. So when I'm in a consult with my bride and their parents, hopefully, I explain to the parents, if they're there, the Jewish parents, I said, listen, and I show them the diagram. I said, this is a huppah. This is where you're all going to stand. How are we going to film the bride and the groom when they exchange vows and things like that? What do you want us to do? I said, listen, during the actual ceremony, I may have you shift over just a little bit, just so we can have a lane to shoot through. And even if they give you the lane to shoot through, as you'll see here, you're still going to see that it's very congested. It's very congested. So now you notice for the typical ceremony setup, Jessica was here facing in this way. But the problem there is she's only got their backs right now. And it's so congested on there, she could probably not even see the rabbi. So she switches to here. Now what does that create? As soon as she switches here and I've got that center cam going, what just happened? What did we just do?
We crossed the 180 line with that shot.
Exactly. So what do you do now? This is a situation where moving to here was your only shot of the bride. And you still wanted to maintain a center cam. So what do? Do we violate the 180 rule? Of course we do. Because we're responsible for recording this bride. Like, we can't tell the bride's parents, by the way, we didn't really get a shot of your daughter during the vows because that would have violated the 180 rule. You know, like, this is not going to fly, especially with Jewish parents. The 180 rule, what are you talking about? Just, film the daughter, film my daughter, film my son. That's what we want to see. We don't care about this 180 rule. We care about the 180 rule, okay? And yes, it is visually odd, when you watch it. But what's more odd is not ever seeing the bride during the ceremony. That would be more odd than violating the 180 rule. So listen, if you have to violate, and sometimes I'll tell you during a Jewish ceremony, we just had one, we didn't even have to violate it because they were actually facing each other. But if they're facing away the entire time, you're going to have to make that adjustment. It's just something that you're going to have to do. And you couldn't get rid of the center shot because you still have a direct shot to the rabbi. The rabbi's facing you, and you usually have a clear shot of the rabbi, so it's a great shot. And you'll see it here. So this is the bride's side during her vows. This is the groom angle. And this is the center angle. And you can see all the people that are underneath the huppah. It gets very crowded under there. I'm not lying in the diagrams. I mean, this is real life situation. You have both sets of parents. You'll notice here you have best man on the other side. You have maid of honor. You have the rabbi. You've got the couple. So it's going to be very congested under there. Okay, if you get burnt and you're out of position and say they're going to break the glass right then, just stay where you are and don't start adjusting. Don't start trying to reposition your tripod and refocus and switch your ISOs and things like that because you're going to miss the shot. If you don't have the shot that you wanted, but at least you have a shot, maybe it's a wide shot and you want a more close-up shot, stay where you are. Train your team. If you have at least a decent shot, just stay where you are. Don't try to get the money shot if you're caught out of position. You just deal with it, but at least you have a shot. Because what happens? A lot of times I've seen teams with 3 guys all miss the kiss. Like they're all 3 cameras are moving right during the kiss because they were caught out of position. They weren't listening, right? And you typically know when the kiss is going to happen. Like when the officiant says something like, okay, we're going to do one final prayer before we pronounce them, husband and wife. So you should automatically know during that prayer, I need to get in position. But sometimes you'll even get a team with 3 guys that fall asleep. And they're not listening to this. So they're not aware of it. But then the situation comes where they're going to pronounce them and they're all out of position. They're all adjusting their cameras and just making small adjustments that are visually disruptive now to this grand moment, which was the kiss, where you could have just held a wide shot or medium shot and you would have been fine. That type of thing. Any questions from studio?
I had a question earlier when you were talking about the grandma that knocked over your C300. A problem that I run into quite a bit, and I've heard different people's opinions on how to deal with it, is guests that lift up their iPads and are trying to take pictures, and they're lifting up their iPhones and standing in the middle aisles trying to get their own picture, or even photographers who get in the way. And one opinion I've heard is just keep filming. If they're in the way, don't try to recompose to adjust to all the guests' desires and then explain it to the bride. And I've tried to stay out of their way. Where do you fall on that side of it?
You certainly want to be on the same page with the photographer. The greatest thing about being able to film with his DSLRs is we have what? Interchangeable lenses. We can shoot wide, we can shoot long, we can shoot mid-range. So I always get with the photographer, I says, hey, how are you going to shoot the procession? I'm going to shoot long. Okay, I'll shoot long. Like Jessica will shoot long, you shoot long. How are you going to shoot the side? I'm going to shoot wide. I said, okay, I'll shoot wide. Or they're going to shoot mid-range, I'll shoot mid-range. So you can always meet in the middle, right? Or you can give them ideas like, hey, I was going to kind of go wide for this. And it's like, okay, I'll shoot wide. But you don't want to get them out of their game or not allow the photographer to do their job. Because they do have a function, they do have a style, and they're used to doing things a certain way. But the cool thing about these cameras is we can kind of adjust to whatever their style is. As long as their style is not too crazy. But I know what you're talking about because I get this all the time, where they jump into the aisle. I've had situations where, during the procession is when that generally happens, or are you talking about the kiss?
I'm talking more like the guests. I've got, during my weddings,
During the course of the ceremony?
during the course of the ceremony, they'll actually get in the middle aisles or they'll put up their
I
iPads.
will go up and I'll have them have a seat. I'm very assertive to the point where I'll go up and I say, sir, you have to sit down. You know, there's professional photographers here. There's, you know, a video team here. Watch it later, you know, just take the photo from your seat. I don't think I've had one so bad where it was just crazy, where they just flooded the center like that. But generally you have one or two, or like an uncle that'll come up and he wants to be the photographer or the videographer, or you'll notice like the floating videographer around the ceremony, and it's like the uncle or, you know, the grandfather or something like this. So just be assertive, or just have an assistant. I'll generally have the assistant go over and I say, hey, you know, have that guy sit down, you know, something like that. Or if there's a coordinator or a planner, trust me, they're getting them out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment about the 180 rule. So that was another video that I watched last night. And the last video that we played, or that you showed a clip of, and her audio was so incredible, that girl as well. It sounded like she was whispering and you could hear every word she was saying.
Which one?
Just the last video that you said you had to cross the 180 rule.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, her audio was incredible, but I was so captivated by what she was saying that I would have never in a million years noticed about the 180 rule, ever.
Exactly.
Because you're so immersed in the emotion, you don't think about it.
You know the reason why her audio was so good? If you notice, the rabbi was holding the mic up to the mouth. And we always tell them, even though we've got them mic'd up, because what did I tell you the best source of audio is going to be? The main feed, because they're holding it up. Well, generally when the officiants are doing the vows and the ring exchange, they don't hold the mic up to their mouths. We make sure that they hold the mic up to, because now we have like a direct source of audio when they're holding it up. Now this guy, I think he had a microphone, or he only had a lav. He didn't have a handheld. We were assuming he was going to have a handheld. So what he did was he actually physically grabbed his lav and he was reaching it over to try to get their audio and things like that. So visually it looked kind of odd. We were hoping he was going to be using a handheld mic, but either way, we always instruct the officiants to hold the mic up to, not up here because then it's, you know, it's distracting because it's covering their face, usually just below the chin. You just hold it just below the chin and that's perfect, if they remember. There was, we had one wedding recently where, and it was a very important wedding, and I wanted really, really good audio. The problem was, we didn't have much control in this wedding. So, the groom wasn't wearing a lav, the officiant wasn't wearing a lav, and the bride wasn't wearing a lav. So basically, we were just relying on our feed from the direct board, right? Because you weren't allowed to lav anybody. No bride, no groom, no officiant. They had their own mic system, and this was it. The only problem was they didn't lav the bride for their system. So I was like, oh my God. So I asked the officiant, I said, sir, could you please remember when it's time for the vows and the ring exchange? Could you just grab, he wasn't even using a handheld mic, he had a lav on, so he wasn't even, but they had a handheld mic by the altar area that he could have used. So I said, can you just grab that handheld mic just for the vows and ring exchange? And then he told me, he says, look, if I remember to do it, I'll do it. If not, you know, it is what it is. And I was like, please, sir, just try to remember, because this is like very important wedding, you know? So the vow started, and now it was the bride's turn to say her vows, and he didn't grab the handheld mic till about 10 seconds later, and he actually remembered to bring the handheld mic over, and then I ended up with perfect audio for the whole thing. So just remember, just try to negotiate with the people sometimes, because sometimes they're just not thinking about the videographer. They're thinking about their service and what they have to deliver. So I just try to say, please, just I'll beg for audio. Honestly, I've begged priests for audio. Priests that were just adamant against you know, wearing microphones. You know, I had one. I tell you, in 30 years, he'd never worn a microphone for a videographer, and I literally begged him. I said, please, sir, just this one time. And then he told me, he said, this is the last time I'm ever going to do this. I was like, good. This is probably the last time I'm ever going to work in this church. So it worked out perfect.
Hey, Ray, I got a question great question from Fashion TV. So what kind of sound check do you conduct while setting the audio up? Do you have a checklist, a workflow to ensure you capture perfect audio for your edits while checking the audio? And do you use headphones?
Yes. I'm not the audio, I'm not the sound engineer for my team. It's Jessica. She monitors audio. What we'll do during the reception is, since Jessica's busy filming, if I have an assistant, I'll have the assistant run over and just monitor the audio because the levels are going to be different for the dancing, the live band playing, and the speeches. You know, the audio is going to be a lot different. We're going to discuss that later on for reception coverage and audio. But yeah, we definitely monitor the audio just to make sure the level's okay. You want to make sure that your audio is never clipping, because if your audio is clipping, you're just always going to end up with distorted audio. So that's how we handle that. But yes, to answer the question, we always monitor the audio.
And can you define clipping for us?
Is if they look at their levels, you know, when the audio levels are kind of at the maximum range, and hitting that maximum range, we try to use -12, peaking at -6 as a general rule as the maximum that will allow that level to go up.
Thank you.
But once it's beyond that and it's kind of just hitting the end constantly, you know, you're clipping at that point, and you're going to end up with some distorted audio. And probably most of us have at some point ended up with some distorted clipping audio, which is not fun in post.
Great. A few people have this question, including Bio Sambo Films. How would Jessica film the reaction of the groom when the bride is coming down the aisle, if she's in the aisle? How do you...
That's a secret. No, I'm kidding. We can't tell you. She generally does it before. Depends on the length of the aisle. Like I told you, if the aisle's a mile long, she's got time to kind of go to the side, get the groom reaction, and then come back for the actual bride entering the aisle. If it's a short aisle, she'll do it beforehand. And basically in post, what you're seeing is a reaction that was taken maybe when the groom's parents were coming down and not the actual bride. You know, it's a little trickery in post, because when the groom is standing up there and friends and family are coming down the aisle, he's generally emotional, you know, whether he's smiling or maybe tearing up and things like that. So sometimes you can trick the viewer in post, and that's how we do it, because sometimes you just don't have time to step to the side, get the groom reaction, and then come back in time to get the bride coming down the aisle and maintain focus and do all that. So it just depends. Don't get too risky when it comes to trying to get that groom reaction, because if you don't feel like you're going to have enough time to get the groom reaction and the actual bride coming down the aisle, just get the groom reaction from before. You know, he's going to be standing up there, and most of the groom reactions that you've seen in our work, some of them are not even real. You know, when the actual bride was coming down, it was when maybe his sister was coming down, or his aunt, or a grandparent, or something like that, but they're still smiling, they're still emotional, and it still works if you cut it together with the actual bride coming down.
I will say that you do seem to get a lot of the men crying, so you seem to work that out some way.
They're very emotional during these ceremonies. That's why I tell you, like, you can trick the viewer with these films. You know, it doesn't all have to be very linear. You know, that's the reason why we edit. You know, we're looking for the best shots, the most emotional shots, and sometimes the emotions come before the bride's coming down. Sometimes you never know. But if the aisle's short and you're very limited, you're just not going to have time to get that, unless you have like a third active shooter, which is always a great scenario. You're just not going to have time to get it.
That Jessica was able to take camera 2 from in front of the groom, getting his reaction, and then over his shoulder to get that rack focus. Is she on sticks for that? Is she moving a whole tripod setup for that, or was she monopod? So she's
on sticks the whole time.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, because it's outdoors, it's on the grass, so you have uneven footing. So to try to battle that, you know, handheld or on a monopod, it's just, and with a 70 to 200 no less, doing a rack focus on a monopod, and being tack sharp and focus, it can be very challenging.
What do you do when you have I know you were showing us the Jewish wedding and you were really congested, but some of the weddings I'm shooting, I mean, the altar area is so small, and then they'll have huge bridal parties. Do you just make it a point to connect with the bride and said, you know, this is where we will shoot from? What if you just don't have a lot of room up there, in the altar area?
Yeah. Like I said yesterday, if you don't have a shot, you have to do whatever you have to do to achieve a shot. You can't just miss the shot. And a lot of times you can pre-plan for stuff, but maybe when you get to the church, whoever the coordinator is for the church, they have their own way of how the bridal party lines up. I had one wedding in particular where they lined up the bridesmaid and the groomsmaids and the groomsmen almost like a football huddle around the bride and the groom. So you had no angle, no matter where your cameras were, you had no shot of the bride and the groom. So basically you had to like break ranks with a monopod just to get a shot of the bride and the groom. And this was a very smart idea that some coordinator at church came up with to basically conceal the bride and the groom from all the guests, all the cameras and things like that with the bridesmaids and the groomsmen, So trust me, I've seen almost every bad situation. What I will tell you is if you don't have a shot, just train yourself to do whatever you have to do to get the shot. That's our rule, number one. If you don't have a shot, don't just stay there because you're going to stay there for 40, 50 seconds, minute, 2 minutes with no shot, wondering if this problem is going to kind of like take care of itself. And most times it's not.
Okay, from White Orchid Studios. I know that sometimes changing batteries and cards can be like a singer taking a breath at the right time. What's your guys' workflow on cards and batteries? And I bet you come with a lot of extras.
Absolutely. These cards for the cameras, they're semi-cheap. Unless you're shooting 4K on the 1DC, then they're about $700 or $800 a card. But most of these cards nowadays, they're very affordable. Just, like I tell you, invest in the essential gear first. And when we're first starting out, we don't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have all these toys that I have right now. I just literally had the essentials that I needed to film a wedding. You need batteries, plenty of them so you don't run out, plenty of chargers. Make sure you recharge all your batteries before every shoot. That's like rule number one, especially in your audio recorders, because you don't want those things going dead midway through a ceremony. So stock up on cards. I'm completely stocked up on cards right now, completely stocked up on batteries. I could shoot literally probably 2 or 3 different weddings with the amount of batteries, cards, and additional gear that I have right now. And sometimes we've been asked to film 2 weddings on the same date, and we have. Actually, last week we did. We don't like to do it, but it comes up sometimes.
So Jay's photo and Eric S. plus 4 other people asked, would you ever use a GoPro for your wide unmanned camera? And what do you think about using a GoPro?
I wouldn't use one. Most of the situations that I run into, honestly, especially ceremonies, they're very low lit. Because down in South Florida, even though we're on the beaches and things like that, there's a lot of rain down there, and a lot of brides don't want to risk the rain and the humidity and the heat. So you see a lot of the ceremonies happen indoors, in a ballroom. But what do they do in the ballroom? They turn down all the lights. These GoPros just do not function, as far as I know, well in, they don't perform well in low light situations, as far as I know. I don't know about the new ones, but I wouldn't use one.
A lot of people in the chat room are really curious about Jessica.
Oh my God.
So we're just interested, maybe you can talk about your personalities, like how is she warm and outgoing? And how, as a team, do you complement each other? Is that too much? Is that too big a topic?
No, it's perfect.
Okay, what do you think about that?
They're probably wondering why she's not here and I'm here, right?
No, they're not.
I had somebody in Brazil ask me, and he's like, if Jessica does all this stuff, why are you here and she's not? Right. It sounds like she does all the work, but she does so much work. I'll tell you this about our personalities. We're both perfectionists, and we're looking for perfection, which is a great thing. We both care about what we're delivering to the clients, which is a great thing, especially when you're dealing with like a husband and wife team. Jessica is, she's more reserved, so she's not kind of out there being active with the clients or anything like that, but she is very assertive. So if she needs something, she's certainly going to ask for it. But she's kind of like the silent team player. She just goes there, she does her job, and she gets out. Jessica's, her love is for editing. Her love for shooting, I don't think there's much love there. But she has to do it because I rely on her, and I've invested so much time in her, and she's gotten so good at being like a primary second shooter that I couldn't imagine a shoot without her. So I definitely rely on Jessica a lot. And I hope she doesn't quit shooting, because it'd be very difficult to replace her, for sure. But her love and her passion is definitely for editing. Well, we just talked about in illustrations, but now we're going to go hands-on. And the cool thing is, we've actually got an actual bridal party. We have a bride, a groom, an officiant, the bride's parents, bride's grandparent, and best man, maid of honor. So this is going to get really cool. But the cool thing is you're going to have very good visual references as we go through ceremony coverage. The first thing I want to cover is the procession. So if I can get the tripod, yeah. So like we talked about, my tripod's a little bit different at home, so it's not so, doesn't take up so much real estate. But pretty much you want to get with the photographer, see what the photographer is going to be, because you do have to work as a team. Generally, the photographer will have one person up here long, hopefully 70 to 200. So we adjust and we'll have a camera up here, 70 to 200, right next to the photographer. The back camera, like I told you, is me. I'm camera number 1 with the glide cam all the way in the back. And generally, there'll also be a photographer back there trying to get either a side shot or a rear shot as the bride makes her way up to the groom. So just figure out how they're shooting. If they're shooting wide, we shoot wide. If they want to shoot longer, we can shoot longer. That's the beauty of having these DSLR cameras with interchangeable lenses. We can kind of adjust sometimes to the photographer's style so we don't kind of work against each other during these important moments right here. Can I get the camera with just my camera there? And actually in that bag right there, I have the 70 to 200. Yeah. So this camera here is going to be camera number 2, which is going to be the primary camera. This is really, and I call this the primary camera, even though I'm back there and I'm getting these creative shots, this is really the primary camera that's got the biggest responsibility, which is the bride and her father coming down the aisle. It's going to be a very difficult task because, like I told you before, you're going to be manually focusing with this DSLR camera, which could be very challenging. One thing that you can do with this camera, if you're a camera number 2 position, is you have a lot of guests that are coming down the aisle. And a lot of times when you're trying to maintain the focus, you can practice on the guests because the guests are the guests. You can get shots of them later on once they're seated, but the actual walk down the center aisle to their seats is not that critical to your shots. So what we'll try to do is we'll kind of get the pacing down. You know, if you are a camera 2, you can get the pacing down and try to really start practicing and nailing the focus because, like I tell you, we just need 2 or 3 seconds of that shot. Really, you should always be trying to achieve a tack sharp focus because that's always what looks the best with these cameras. If you have a softer focus, you've seen these kind of shots, it's just not the same. The quality's not the same. So just try to practice as best you can as the guests are coming down. Adjust this, just make sure everything's level. A lot of times you'll probably be shooting and you have uneven footing. Maybe you're on the grass, maybe you're on beach sand and things like that. So it's very important if your tripod has this functionality to where you can level it off, make sure you level it off. So that way everything on your horizontal plane, everything's kind of nice and even. So this is the primary here. And as you can see, I'll have to adjust my ISO here just to expose some people back here. And remember, always check focus. Like if you have the opportunity where you have something static that you want to film and they're not moving, you're not moving, just try to check focus. You know, if you have some people back there or maybe you have some people lined up waiting to make their march down the aisle, just check focus here. And obviously make sure you check focus on whatever's closer to your camera. And here, he would be the primary focus. I think he just saw himself, looking quite studly. So there's going to be areas of a room, especially if your ceremony's indoors, there's going to be areas of the room that are a little bit more exposed than others. There's going to be some underexposed areas. So just be prepared to manipulate your ISO to expose those shots properly. Manipulate your shutter speed. Depending on the camera, sometimes you don't want to introduce too much of this digital grain to your imagery because then the imagery might start to fall apart. So it just depends. As a general rule, with these DSLR cameras, I really don't like to exceed 2500 ISO. Sometimes if you have to push 3200, it really just depends on the camera at that point and how well it kind of, the output of that signal is going to be. So The procession is going to start. We practice a little bit. We understand what our responsibilities are during the ceremony procession. I'm camera 1. This is camera 2. And then we're going to have the small tripod. This is going to be our safety camera. And this is a larger tripod than what we use. The tripod that we use is very small. It weighs about not even 2 pounds. So it's very small. It's not so big and bulky like this one. And generally along the center aisle sometimes you have candles. Sometimes you have flowers. And it's always great if you can, if they have, say like a flower vase or something like that, or a vase with a candle, to kind of tuck this camera in and around, kind of hug that vase with this tripod. And you're going to get your angle here. Now, what determines what side we're shooting on? Because right now we're all set up to shoot from this side, and camera 1 would be in the back also on the left side. But what determines that? Go ahead.
Maybe light. That
Good
goes
answer.
Through windows.
It could be light. Your lighting could be better shooting this way because maybe the sun is also coming this way. And you don't want to shoot against the light because maybe you're going to end up with an underexposed image. So that's pretty good. But also when you're indoors sometimes, all the lighting is pretty much going to be the same. But sometimes this side over here, maybe the architecture and just what this wide camera is seeing on this side is a lot better than looking than if the camera was on this side. Maybe on this side, you've got speakers and exit signs and things that are just really going to detract from the image. So this small camera, believe it or not, this small camera that's unmanned actually determines where everybody's going to position themselves. This small camera here, because this small camera, it's had a 14 lens on there, so it's actually seeing a lot more than what the 70 to 200 is seeing, and also what my glide cam is seeing. This is actually exposing a lot. A lot of information is coming into this lens because it is wider, it's a 14 lens. So for instance, if this side actually looked better, or maybe the bride was coming from this side, maybe this camera was going to adjust itself and be placed over here. So that means all the cameras are going to shift to this side now, even me in the back for camera 1 with the glide cam. So it just depends. So remember, wherever if you employ this small camera, the safety camera, wherever that camera goes, whatever side it goes, that's where all the cameras are going to adjust to. Because you don't want these camera 1 and camera 2 on this side and then camera 3 on that side, because then camera 3 is actually going to see camera 1, and vice versa. Now camera 1 is going to actually see camera 3. So we're set up for the procession. Procession happens, and now we have to adjust for the actual ceremony setup. Does anybody have any questions in regard to procession? You guys good on that? Now, procession, as you're waiting for the procession, don't just get tunnel vision on the center aisle waiting for people to come. If you have time, what are we looking for on the wedding day?
Emotions from all of the guests.
There you go, content. We're still looking for content. So if you have time, don't just fall asleep at the wheel, okay? If you have time, the procession hasn't started yet, start looking for family members because they have to be part of this film. If they're here, if they're emotional, if they have reactions. A lot of times during the pre-ceremony, a lot of the reactions that you're getting, they're not as interested in what's going on. They're kind of just mingling with each other. But sometimes you have somebody that could give you a look that maybe you can use in the film to maybe trick the viewer and things like that. So remember, 3 to 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. If there's nothing there, a lot of times during the pre-ceremony, there's people taking pictures. And when the actual procession is going on, people are taking pictures. So those are shots that you don't have to get while the actual procession is going on because you're getting them now. Okay, so there's always something to be had. That's one thing that Jessica's always looking for when she's on this camera is people snapping pictures because she can use it later on in the edit as people were coming down live during the procession that she didn't have time to actually pan away and get these amateur photographers. She'll just use the pre-shots to kind of tie into those shots. So always keep working. So we're set up for the procession. The procession happens. If you have time, like I told you, if the bride has a long walk, you're probably going to have time to maybe come to the side with this camera and get a shot of the groom standing up here waiting for the bride. Sometimes you just don't have that luxury because maybe like here, it's a very short aisle, so you're not going to have a lot of time to work with. could I just have the groom just waiting up here so we can see this? I think we were going to have all the lights on for this segment, right? Are we still going to do that? Okay, cool. We could probably do that. Okay. Yeah. Yay, we got light. Yeah, just stand on that side. That's fine. Okay. Okay. So right now we're pretty well exposed. So you don't need as much ISO, I wouldn't think. Remember to check focus, always. These cameras only look good when they're in focus. You see that? Tack, sharpen, focus, and now you have a beautiful image. Nothing's overexposed. I still have the details in the whites. Nothing's underexposed. It looks like I still have some good details in the blacks. And we have a good image. So remember, here, and Jamie, I just want you to look at your bride and her parents. You see the reaction I have right there? I could use this in the edit for 2 to 3 seconds. If the bride was coming down the aisle in the edit and you saw this reaction, you wouldn't know the difference that this was actually recorded during pre-ceremony. So we're good. We have the shot. And now we just assume our position, camera number 2. Make sure everything's leveled off again because we moved. And now everything's kind of level.
Ray, can I ask you a quick question about exposure?
Absolutely.
Do you try to overexpose by stop, underexpose by stop all the time, or are you always just trying to get your exposure perfect?
I try to get the exposure as close to perfect as I can.
Okay.
If I had the choice, and there's a little bit of, is it going to be overexposed a little bit, or is it going to be underexposed? I'll go for a half a stop under, because you can always bring that stuff later back in post. But with these cameras, they shoot so compressed that once you lose the detail, it's generally gone. And it's not anything that you can bring back in post. Okay, perfect. And that's cool. So you can stand up there. So now we're going to have the bride come up. And I'll have you stop right there. Now remember background awareness. This is going to be very important. We try to do this as best we can with the small camera. Like I told you, there's going to be things within the frame that maybe you don't want in the frame. You have this beautiful bride, and the last thing you want to do is kind of detract from this image of this beautiful bride. So if I've got a shot like this, and I've got a DJ in the background, frame him out, but be aware of him. Be aware of exit signs. Be aware of your gear, so that your gear is not in the way. That's big, right? You have like a beautiful shot, and then all of a sudden in post, the picture is this big, and now you see a monopod up against the wall, or a tripod, or some piece of gear that you could have taken out of the shot. So just remember to clean up. As you're planning these shots and you're positioning your cameras, make sure no unneeded gear is kind of laying around and in your shots. Because we have enough stuff to deal with. Here we have lights and light stands and things like that. So the last thing we need is our own gear being visible. Okay. Sometimes can I just have you and your dad stand there together? How awesome is this? We have a bride and an actual bride's father here. I mean, this is, Creative Live has really outdone themselves. Okay, so sometimes you have the bride and her father just waiting at the back entrance, waiting to come in. If you have that situation, and I'll get you guys a little bit closer. There you go. Yeah. So if you have them waiting there, take advantage, just get a shot, 3 to 5 seconds. Sometimes, can you guys just look at each other? There you go. Yeah, you look beautiful. They're getting ready to walk down. That's typically what you're seeing at an actual ceremony. It's the father like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going to happen. I'm going to give you away. That type of thing. So you get this shot, and now they're going to make the march down. And generally, since I'm in the back, I'm camera 1, I'm in the back with a glide cam, sometimes I will talk to them. A lot of times I'll talk to them. I say, listen, guys, when you go down, Just walk, enjoy the moment. Just walk nice and gracefully, nice smiles. Try not to talk too much business, that type of thing. Because sometimes when they're walking down, you see the moving lips. They're having some conversation about a football game or something, with the bridal party. So I just try to keep them in the moment, in the zone, nice smiles. There's be a lot of people taking photos. Just a nice, easy pace, and just enjoy this. And usually it's a nice walk. But sometimes you'll have a bridal party that comes down and they walk by themselves. And this is a very bad situation because a lot of times they get nervous, especially like bridesmaids will be coming down by themselves and they just get nervous and they want to run down the aisle, because they just want to get it over with, that type of thing. So you have to be very careful. This becomes very challenging, like I said, and a lot of times you might be relying on that camera number 3 to kind of cover everything. But here, you want to make sure if there's anything in the background that you can have removed, either by an assistant or something, like if Jessica was shooting here and there was something in the background, maybe even that light stand, maybe she would have the assistant say, hey, can you move that light stand over because it's going to be in all of my shots. There's no way to kind of frame it out of the shot. Okay, so bride and groom are ready to come down. Hopefully the bride and her father are going to be in focus, at least for 2-3 seconds as they're coming down. I'm not even going to attempt this because I'm not Jessica, but they're going to come down. You guys can make your march down. They'll come down. Now, when they get close, here's the thing, because this 70 to 200 shot, this is more of an intimate shot of the bride and her father coming down. You can see it literally took them not even 2 seconds to complete the aisle. So you don't have a lot of time to sit there and try to get a groom reaction and then come back and try to get the bride and her father coming down. There's just not enough time. So the most important shot is going to be the bride and her father coming down. Now, since the aisle's so short, and it did take only 2 seconds for them to get out of frame, you want to probably shoot as wide as possible and not punching into, say, like 200. I mean, it looks really good when they're back there, but that little second and a half that it takes them to get out of frame, it's going to happen very fast. So you may want to start at 70 instead of punching into 200. Just be very careful because you don't want to miss a shot. But like I said, if you happen to miss a shot, hopefully you're going to have something to cover you, and hopefully that's going to be like a camera number 3. We employ this 100% of the time. Actually, Jessica will not even run a procession without having that safety camera. I mean, it's just mandatory because it has covered us a couple of times. It's just things happen, things are live, and they're fast, and you can't redo anything. So it's a great thing to have. Okay, so once, can you come up and just, when you come up, I'm going to have you give your daughter away to Jamie, that type of thing. Just go through the motion of just handing her off. Is that cool? Yeah. So, yeah, you can do it now, yeah. Yeah, and remember, tuck this camera as much as you can. And like I said, the tripod that I use is a fraction of this size. So it's not as big and bulky, and it's not interfering with this person's legs or anything. So, and it's actually not even obstructing any part of the aisle, because the last thing you want is a bride tripping on your tripod. They're probably not going to forget that for the rest of the day. So you guys can come down. And then I'm going to hold you off like right there. So once they're about right there, camera number 2 is already making a transition. Probably a little bit further. Probably a little bit further out. And she's going to widen up here. Make sure everything's wide. And let me just make sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And you guys can come up and just kind of hand her off. So now there's a little bit of wide shot. This is about as wide as I can go without actually backing up. So now you can take your seat there where you were. Yep. And everybody can kind of come in, the grandma. And you can come in. Everybody can kind of assume their positions if you want. This is a little bit congested here because we've got students and a very tight space. But I tell you, sometimes you may end up in a situation where you just have a tight space, and you might not even be on a tripod. You might be on a, can I get the monopod? This space here is so tight, where honestly, we probably wouldn't even be on a tripod with 70 to 200 with this setup, because it's just too small a space to maneuver. So remember what I told you before, if you're not going to have a shot, get a shot. Just do whatever you have to do to get a shot. So what I would do is I would probably have this camera. Jessica would have this camera on a monopod with probably like a 50 lens, because you don't really need to cover a lot of real estate here with a big 70-200 lens. You could probably just get away with a 50 lens. The good thing about the monopod is that you could shoot the procession here, and then as soon as the father was going to hand his daughter off to Jamie, just kind of move here, and you can get the shot without taking up too much real estate with your tripod and things like that, and having to level it off and all that. So the monopod is very versatile. I highly recommend this tool, especially if you're in a tight space. Sometimes the guests on the bride's side, they're up against a wall, so you don't even have the opportunity to come down the side to try to get a groom angle. So you really need to make a decision. Am I going to cover just this bride angle, because I really don't have a groom angle, and just the center angle? It just depends. I've been in very small chapels where there just wasn't a lot of room to move. There wasn't a lot of room for your team. So pre-planning is going to be critical. So they're up here now, and then I'll probably, instead of having you guys on his side, I'll have you step up a little bit more. Yeah, and just face each other. Okay. This room, we got all the lights on? Yeah, right? This room, yeah. This room is okay. The lighting for these cameras, I think is okay. I think it's going to work without any type of off-camera lighting, depending on the situation. But sometimes you have to be very careful, because you may come into a room pre-ceremony time, and this is the lighting. But then as soon as the ceremony, the procession starts, they drop the lighting. So you have to be prepared that they're going to drop that lighting, because most coordinators and most decor people and most brides, they want this low-lit affair. So you're going to have a situation where you're going to have candles running up and down the center aisle, and just very dimly lit. They just think this looks the best. And a lot of times it looks very good, but for us, it's very challenging, because now what you have up here is even more underexposed than what you have out here with the candles and everything. So you have to be very careful, be set up for it. In every case that I'm inside a ballroom and I'm not outside where I know what the light's going to do for the most part, I'll have an off-camera light already set up just in case. What I will generally try to do always is get with whoever's taking care of the lights, and I'll ask them before the ceremony starts. I says, can you show me what it's going to look like for the ceremony? And generally they'll show me what it's going to look like for the ceremony. Now, sometimes these people, that, like the banquet managers or whatever, they'll leave, but I'll see where the lighting control is. So as soon as they leave, maybe I'll sneak over and I'll just kind of dim it up just a little bit to where I need it, and then hope they don't come back and, right? Yeah, so we need light. And let me tell you, the light that's in those rooms is always going to look better than the light that we try to employ ourselves, because that light that's there is part of the lighting scheme. It's part of the design, it's part of that environment, whereas our light is really not part of that plan. So our light is always going to kind of look, it's going to stand out a lot more than their own lights and chandeliers and things like that look great. So sometimes you can just dim up a chandelier just a little bit, especially for the center aisle, because what's going to happen, even if they're well lit up here, the center aisle is generally dark. So you're going to run into a problem there, So this camera here, the camera 3, and Jessica's camera, they're going to have to work with their ISO a little bit just to expose the images, and hopefully it's not too dark. We have had situations in low light where we just had one recently in New Jersey where it was nighttime. The chuppah, it was beautifully lit, but the center aisle was completely dark. And what happens is it was a very long aisle, and Jessica had a light on her camera just to expose the procession that was coming at her. But in the back, it was completely dark. So what I did was I took a little light stand with an LED light from the back, and I just threw it in the opposite direction. And it actually gave me really good light for the back half of the procession coming down the aisle. So just think of different ways to, actually, can I get that light stand? And again, my light stand that I use is probably a third this size. It's very lightweight. It probably weighs less than a pound. It's very small. It doesn't take up a lot of real estate at all. And I'll have an LED light like this on it, and I'll put it down low. This light, the torch LED light that I showed yesterday, it's very versatile, and it's got a lot of throw on it, and it's dual temperature. So if I'm outside during daylight and I'm trying to get daylight balance, it has a daylight temperature. And if I need tungsten, it has tungsten, or I can blend the two to get what I need. So this is what I used, probably like 3/4 of the way up the aisle. I kind of threw it back towards the procession, making their way into the aisle area. And I was able to actually get some really nice lighting that way. And that's it. So this is a good handy light. The good thing about this power is self-contained. You don't have to plug it in. So you could just have this light on a very small light stand anywhere. So if you ever need light, the wedding that I showed that we lost audio because of the generator, you'll notice the groom was he was a black male and the bride was a white female. We had a little bit of an exposure problem because he was wearing a white suit, he was darker skinned, and the way he was positioned at the altar area, he was very underexposed on one side of his face. We actually set this up on one side and we turned it on. You couldn't even notice during that ceremony, but it actually exposed him pretty well for the film. So you have to be prepared. Like I tell you, get the essential tools so you're always prepared. Because if I didn't have this and I didn't have the LED light at that wedding, I wouldn't have been able to do that. You know, if I didn't have this set up for that procession that was really dark towards the back, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And this is a very cheap kit. Yes.
Ray, when you have those LED lights, do you use any kind of modifier on top of it, a grid or barn doors or anything when you're trying to throw it?
Nothing.
Okay.
Because I'm not looking for spot. I'm looking for more coverage than anything. So these tend to flood out. They've got a lot of spill, which is fine. And it's also dimmable, so I can control the intensity. So you never want to blow out the image. You never want to make it so bright to where your light turns into a giant eyesore at these events. You just need a reasonable amount of light with these cameras, because these DSLR cameras, they function so well in low light that you don't need to feed it a whole lot of light. We just need a reasonable amount of light. And as you'll see here, without even employing a light and just minor adjustments to the ISO, I'm going to be able to expose this image pretty well. And I usually deal with situations a lot dimmer than this. And we're actually going to take a look. I think they're going to cut these lights in a couple minutes to show like a low lit ceremony and how I employ my off-camera light. We won't do it now, but in a couple seconds. But let me just move this to the back. Actually, I'll move that to the rear. I can take questions if while I'm moving this.
Absolutely.
Okay. Excuse me. So Samuel Rose kind of wanted to ask you about, for people just getting started, do you have advice for setting up a wedding solo? Just one person, one photographer, one videographer.
I think it would definitely be a different product. I don't think you would be able to, for instance, sell a client a full ceremony, because at some point during the ceremony, you're going to have to move.
Right.
So if you just gave that one camera angle, you'd have to show the client all your movement during the ceremony, which I don't think would be visually stunning or anything like that. So
right.
I think if you're filming by yourself, definitely have at least a second camera that you can have static, maybe on an unmanned camera. So that way it covers your movement as you move during the ceremony or speeches or other parts of the wedding day. You can certainly film a wedding by yourself. In fact, we have somebody here that films weddings by himself. Do you use unmanned cameras, like static cameras?
Yes, sir. You definitely have to have at least one static camera.
And you do that to cover your movement,
Yes.
basically when you're moving.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it can be done. It's a lot of work. It's double the amount of work, because if you have two people on a shoot, you divide the work equally. But if you just have one person, you're going to have a lot of headaches maybe, and certainly a lot of work to do. So it's definitely possible. It's just I don't recommend it, but if you have no other choice, I would definitely recommend having unmanned camera on a static tripod. Yeah. And, they had the 50 lens. Yeah. So I want to show you guys what the center camera is going to look like. Can I get everybody to shift a little bit this way? Because you're kind of off center with gold fabric. There you go. Okay. So generally, once we're done with the safety camera, like we discussed earlier, it's actually going to become our center aisle camera. So we'll have it back here, hopefully. Make sure everything's leveled off. Very important. Okay, perfect. And you guys can just look at each other. Now here, if the officiant's speaking, you're probably going to want to focus right on the officiant. But be very careful, because if you notice, during this time, your bride and groom, they're probably not going to be tack sharp in focus, or maybe they are, just depending on your aperture. But your focus here should be on the officiant, as a general rule. And then now the ceremony will start. The officiant will go through his sermon.
Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, we are gathered here today to witness and celebrate the joining of Jamie and Lena in marriage. With love and commitment, they have decided to live their lives together as husband and wife. No other human ties are more tender, and no other vows are more important than those that you are about to take. Both of you come to us this day with deep realization that the contract of marriage is sacred, as are all of its obligations and its responsibilities. And I believe you had some vows. And so we'll start with Jamie. I promise to always be forthright and loyal and trustworthy, because only with truth between us can we grow together.
I promise to always be forthright and loyal can you repeat that?
With truth between us can we grow together.
Because only with truth between us can we grow together.
I promise to always embrace and encourage you.
I promise to always embrace and encourage you.
Loving who you are now.
Loving who you are now.
And who you have yet to become.
And who you have yet to become.
I promise to be your partner in all things.
I promise to be your partner in all things.
Not possessing you.
Not possessing you.
But working with you as part of a whole.
But working with you as part of a whole.
I'm going to stop it here. And I'm just going to go into, I want to go into compositions for camera 1, camera 2, and camera 3. As you can see, the center camera's been established here, and they're exchanging vows. Now, for the exchange of vows, I probably want a composition similar to what I have right here. But if the officiant was just kind of going through his sermon, or maybe it's a Jewish ceremony, and they're going through like the 7 blessings, where there's some singing going on and things like that, and Jessica's kind of got that covered with camera 1, I want to make some adjustments here. And if you have the opportunity to get some creative shots, say if you have a slider, if you have another camera that's got maybe a wide-angle lens, maybe start getting some creative shots. But you always want to have a solid camera established center aisle for the most important parts of the ceremony, of course. And back here, see I have that monitor going on a tripod. I want to make sure I kind of frame that out. So I've got the center camera established here. And this camera, honestly, I have a lot of times where the photographer will come up and he'll say, hey, I want to get a close-up shot with a wide lens. And I says, no problem. So I'll change the lens on this camera to a camera that's got a wide lens, and I'll go up with the photographer, because the last thing I want is a photographer crossing the camera during a very important moment, so we can work together as a team. And we'll ask each other, she says, hey, how are you going to shoot the kiss? And then the photographer say, well, I was thinking of shooting it long. I said, perfect. I'll shoot long from the back with you. So you just need to make sure that during the kiss, the photographer's not going to come up and cross the camera or block the shot, because the kiss is, it's very, very important. Or if they're breaking the glass or anything like that. So, yeah.
I have a question. Is there a reason your level of the camera is that low right now? Or
it's just the tripod. Like, I wouldn't have been using this tripod. My tripod that I use it actually has a center stock that actually goes up and down. So I usually manipulate that, but it actually would be a little bit higher.
Like eye level.
It wouldn't be eye level up here.
Would it be?
It wouldn't be eye level. And I tell you, a lot of times you're going to get to these ceremonies, and I think you saw in a couple of the examples how beautiful the ceiling was and the arrangements all around the altar area. If you shoot eye level straight across, you're only going to see this squared up, and you're going to miss everything else that's going on in the frame. So I tend to always shoot at an up angle just to kind of get some of that. Now, obviously, if there's nothing up there or it's not that attractive, then yeah, shoot something a little bit more eye level. But generally speaking, they've got beautiful arrangements up above them, or if they're getting married at a church, they have a cross. So there's other elements that you want to include in the frame. And if you were shooting eye level, not only are you like a giant object now, in the ceremony, I try to remain as under the radar as I can, just low profile, out to the side. I love to shoot from the back long because I don't really have to be up here. The only time that I'll come close is if a photographer wants to come close and shoot more of a wide angle, which is great. And sometimes I can even shoot long, and the photographer will ask me to say, hey, I can go up and just kind of go to the side and I'll be out of your frame, and that's perfect. Usually make sure that he's not going to, at some point important, jump in front of the frame and be in the shot and things like that. So it just depends. A lot of photographers that I work with, we work together a lot. So I already know what they're going to do. If they say they're going to be off to one side, they're just going to be off to one side. If they're going to tend to kind of cross in the middle, I already know I'm going to come up and just be wide with them. So there's got to be a lot of trust there because you are kind of risking a very important moment that's going to come up either with, breaking the glass, the kiss, exchange of vows, and things like that. And I really don't want them in the shot at that point because it's going to be very difficult in post to cover the photographer later on if they do cross during very important moments. So this is this camera here. This is pretty good. And like I said, I can always move forward. I think I'm in hot lava. I can always move forward and I can always move back. I can change lenses. I can do long lenses. I can do wide lenses. I want to show you the composition for the bright angle right now. So if I can get the 70-200.
Just a quick question, Ray.
Yeah.
Do you have a bag, or how are you carrying your lenses or switching them out, or how are you doing that?
I use a Lowell Pro bag. It's an X200, which is an excellent bag, and we travel a lot for the weddings. And this bag is it's airport certified, so everything fits in your overhead compartments on any plane, really. I've only known a couple really small planes where it didn't fit, but it's an excellent bag for your cameras, lenses, audio gear.
But I mean more while you're shooting.
Well, I'm shooting the same bags.
You just have it at the side somewhere?
I'll have it at the side.
Okay.
I'll really try to conceal my bags in a way where they're just not visible. If there's a soundboard, if there's a DJ or something like that, I'll generally put the bags back there, and that's it. So we know exactly what we need for, say, like a ceremony shoot. We know exactly what we need for the reception shoot. So we'll just kind of pull the gear that we need for that particular segment, and that's it. Yeah. All right, cool. So, and I can answer questions if any are coming in while I'm...
Question in the studio audience?
So it sounds like, Ray, that your second shooter is pretty much locked down once they get to this portion, and you're actually doing most of the moving. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The only movement that's going on with the primary shooter up here is panning, either on the officiant, on the bride, or getting cutaways of the family. And we're going to go through some of that right now. I did want to tell you this center angle that we had, even in this room, that's not the greatest light in the world. I was at 400 ISO, which is the native ISO for this particular camera, and it's very clean. Okay, so even in this room, this just goes to show you how well these cameras perform in low light situations. So let me show you what the main angle would be doing here. And when you decide where you're going to be as a main angle, remember it's not going to be just about filming the bride. You also have to get the officiant in here. So this one's going to be a little bit trickier. Lena, could I have you come forward a little bit? And Jamie, I'm going to have you back up just a little bit. That's good. Yeah, so, and you guys have your vows, right? Oh, okay. So this time I'll probably have them read their vows to one another. If that's... And this is probably pretty good composition for. Do you want maybe your maid of honor can hold your flowers? Yeah. Okay. I'll probably bump up my ISO just a little bit. And remember, guys, check focus right there on her eyes, very fast, and now we're ready. It should literally just take you a few seconds to get your exposure right, check focus, and hit record, because these things at the ceremony are going to happen very fast. So you have to be on your toes. And then you guys can go ahead. I'll have Lena go first. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
I promise to always be forthright, loyal, and trustworthy, because only with truth between us can we grow together. I promise to always embrace and encouraging you, loving who you are now and who you have yet to become. I promise to be your partner in all things, not possessing you, but working with you as part of a whole.
I'll stop you there. Were you about to cry? No. Okay. Just checking. Because if you were, I'd keep rolling. I'd let you go. Okay. Okay. So this looks great. I've got an amazing bright angle here. Just remember to level things off. Now, if she's just standing there holding the vows and you're a bright angle and the groom's speaking and she's not crying or she's not emotional, any shot that you can use, just look for other things, because maybe she's doing something with her hands, or maybe they're holding hands. They're doing something else that you're going to be able to consider as like a very usable content that you're going to be able to use later on in the film. So a lot of times they're doing things with their hands, they're squeezing tighter, things like that, things that you can actually see visually that are going to add impact to the film. It's a great cutaway. So just be very aware of what's going on. You don't have to pan down to see the shots there. You can actually just visually see what's going on, and if something's there, you just make the adjustment. Now here I have a problem because, is it? Okay. Yeah. Very important is to charge your batteries before every shoot. Actually, I only had one battery. But here, as you see, we have a little bit of a challenge, because now when the officiant starts talking, we've got Jamie's shoulder in the way, and we don't have really like a clear shot of the officiant. So what I told you before is, if you don't have a shot, you have to do whatever you have to do to get a shot. So in this particular case, where would we have to move to get a shot? Either there, or we could look and say, could we potentially shoot here? It just depends what your lanes look like, your lanes of shooting. In this particular case, that would be very congested to do it that way. So she would probably adjust here, just so I can get a clear shot of the officiant from here. You guys want to take a question?
Yeah, we did have a question that came up that might be kind of fitting. Actually, this was like 5 or 6 people asked this. Ian Dance, Rudy Vasquez, and Black and White. How do you work with the DSLR's short recording time during the ceremony?
This camera here doesn't have any limits. So it just,
the 1D?
Yeah, once it's done, it'll just leak over to the second card. If you do have a camera with a 12-minute limit, this is very common, but it's not anything that anybody should worry about. This is you never really use a shot for longer than 12 minutes in post-production anyways. So unless you're actually delivering every frame of video to your client, which you never are, if the camera shuts off, you just press record again. It's not any problem that you ever have to worry about. In my opinion, it's not even an issue. And usually, both cameras are not going to stop recording at the exact same time. So you're always going to be able to cover actually every frame of video during an event. But honestly, we're delivering, for the most part, 20-minute films, 25-minute films. So you're not delivering the actual full ceremony anyways. And even if you did deliver the full ceremony, you'd at least still have a second camera that was covering you for the time that your camera stopped recording.
Ray, I got kind of a two-part question from Pablo. Do you have any issues matching the footage from the 3 different cameras? And what is your workflow as far as setting the timers on the camera, so when you get your footage back to editing, everything falls into place?
So these cameras, they don't have time code, unfortunately. So you can't sync them like this. They have a great piece of software known as Pluralize. If you don't have Pluralize and you're shooting with DSLRs, you're killing yourselves because this program does all the work for you. It uses the audio that was recorded in camera as a reference to sync everything up in post-production. It's very fast. You don't have to do anything manual but just dropping the clips on the timeline. And this program does everything for you. It does all the work for you. It syncs everything up. And I highly recommend it. If you're shooting DSLR, you have to have Pluralize because to do it all manually, especially how many times I stop and record, because I stop and record all the time because I'm constantly checking focus. So I have a million clips that I'm recording, and literally you can drop a million clips on the timeline, along with Jessica's clips, a center clip, whatever cameras are rolling for this event, and just literally in the click of a button, just have everything sunk up pretty much perfectly.
Great.
With Pluralize, yeah.
Thank you. And then the matching of the footage?
The matching of the footage, you try to do as best you can on set. You know, if color temperature, if everybody's shooting at 5600, all the cameras should be shooting at 5600. If you're doing any type of white balance shift in the camera, all the cameras should be doing the white balance shift. You should try, for the most part, to match your ISOs. Aperture is not too important, but at the end of the day, if there's any imbalance between clips, you just have to correct that in post. And we'll actually cover that tomorrow, where we have 3 different camera angles that we're trying to match up in color correction. So we're going to cover that tomorrow during the editing portion of this. Hopefully everybody hang out for day 3.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Questions in the studio audience? There we go.
So compositionally, with my photography, I'm always partial, if I can get the shot, to try and do over the groom's shoulder looking at the bride and vice versa. So you get that almost as close of an image as you would if you were in that position yourself. But in a tight setting like this, it seems like that'd be, like you were talking with Elaine, almost impossible. And you were saying how you don't want to rush to get to a shot. Would you just say forgo that kind of composition as like nice to have, but get in this position where you can easily pan from bride to officiant and back and forth?
Exactly. Okay. And you don't want to, remember, you can actually compose your shot a little bit wider. Mm-hmm. And in post-production, with these cameras, I mean, the resolution is so great that you can actually punch in a little bit and not really notice any degradation of quality. So, but if you ever have to zoom out, of a clip, that's not going to be a good situation. So,
thank you.
Yeah, just give yourself some room to work in the edit. So the portion that unfortunately we missed during the ceremony was just a low light situation, and I just wanted to be able to show you how we employed our off-camera lighting system. But you're actually going to see this off-camera lighting system during reception training, which is great because reception training is going to start right now. And I just want to mainly show you how effective our off-camera lights are. You saw these lights yesterday. Our main light is the Dito light. It's a 150-watt light. We're also going to use this for the reception. Mainly at receptions because most ceremonies you can't really, especially in churches, you can't really employ due to restrictions. You can't really employ these off-camera lights and things like that. So it's mainly at the receptions that I want to show you how we use these lights. One of the things that you have at weddings, like we discussed all along, is what? Challenges. And what are the challenges? Mainly lighting. It's always lighting because we're looking for lighting, but they're not really giving us lighting. So we have to, like I tell you before, we have to find the light, but now we're dealing with the reception. And generally, receptions are what? They're low lit. They're low lit affairs. You're generally not going to walk into a reception and it's going to be big bright lights everywhere. That's just not the case. It's very low lit. It's candle lit. They want to keep the ambience very low lit, which is great visually. But for us, when it comes to speeches and dancing and other things, we need to feed these cameras light. So what do? We need to think about lighting. Positions of lighting. What's the most important thing that we're concerned with at a wedding reception? Anybody know? Diana?
Toast speeches?
Exactly. Why? Because it's our dialogue. It's our storytellers, right? They're going to narrate our film. Vows, ring exchange, readings, the sermons by the officiant, the speeches. These are These are our storytellers. We need to preserve this audio, first and foremost, but then we need to be able to actually see them, right? And during the reception, you don't want one of your storytellers standing in the dark, because you do have to kind of cut back to this storyteller during the film, so the viewer knows where this voice is coming from in your film. This narrator has to be revealed at some point. So we have very poor lighting. Sometimes we have no lighting, right? Sometimes you have a dance floor and there's absolutely no lighting. How do we deal with this? We have to employ some lighting. And again, our main light is going to be this ditto light, the 150 watt ditto light that you saw earlier. And sunset. How is sunset lighting? It's pretty good, right? It's magic hour. But what's the problem with sunset? The sunset's very quick. So if they're running late, do brides run late, or are they generally on time? They usually run late. 15 minutes could mean the difference between a sunset shot and a nighttime shot. So, and generally these brides, they're going to tend to run late. I'll always recommend to my brides, if they're going to have a so-called sunset wedding, get married about an hour before sunset begins. The lighting is still going to be beautiful because it's still going to be setting, but you give yourself some buffer room. The other advantage to maybe having the ceremony an hour before sunset, it's now you have beautiful lighting all throughout the ceremony, and then after the ceremony, you actually have that magic hour, that nice, beautiful sunset where you can go out and you can get some candid shots. So there's a lot of advantages to planning it that way. A sunset wedding, it's a very sexy thing. You know, oh, I'm having a sunset wedding. You know, it's a very, sexy term that they use now. It's not a sunset wedding, it's a nighttime wedding. Okay, and if you have buildings that are blocking out the sun, or in some states you have mountains that are going to block out that sun setting, it's actually going to get darker sooner. So you're basically left with no light. I had a wedding, and they said it was going to be a sunset wedding, and I was looking at a rehearsal, and I said, oh my God, this is not going to be a sunset wedding, it's going to be a nighttime wedding. The only lights, when the sun actually set and became dark, the only lights that were actually running were my ditto lights, period. They had candles along the perimeter of the ceremony area. They had absolutely no lighting on the altar area, zero. It was pitch black. In fact, when the ceremony ended, I turned off my lights and people freaked out. They were like, oh my God, where'd the lights go? Because it was so dark and they still needed to do family pictures. So the photographers actually asked, they said, can you actually leave those lights on? Because it's the only light that we have out here. So just imagine if you weren't prepared, if you didn't invest in the essentials, lighting, audio, camera gear, and things like that. You just saw during the ceremony, we weren't in the best lighting situation for the ceremony, but I was still shooting at 400 ISO, 500 ISO. So what does that tell you? These cameras function very well in low light situations. So that's something that you have to take into account when you're investing in your gear. Is it going to make it look better? Is it going to make it sound better? I want to show you a clip here. This was kind of funny because some of these weddings you'll have a host or you'll have a master of ceremonies, correct? And what are one of the typical things that these master of ceremonies love to do when they speak to the guests in the room? They do what I'm doing right now. They want to walk the room. It's part of their routine to kind of work the room. The problem is that our light source, it's only hitting one spot. We don't have it on, a remote or anything like that where we can actually have somebody following them with our lights. So once we've kind of set the main light, we kind of need our character, if you will, to stay in this particular zone. So I had this wedding. They had a master of ceremony. And I went up to them. I always give them instruction. Even the people giving speeches, you want to instruct what you need. Say, listen, I need you to stay in this zone. You don't have to stay stuck to one spot, but at least try to stay in a zone. If you do stay in one spot, it's even better. A lot of times, if you can request either a podium or a microphone stand, that almost ensures that they're going to be in one spot. And then you can really set your lighting and your cameras, and you're not stressing that they're going to go off camera and out of your lighting zone. So this guy was there, and this one was funny because this is a TV guy, right? That was the master of ceremony. So he's used to being on TV and kind of working the camera and things like this. So I went up to him and I said, sir, listen, I really need you to stay in your zone when you're speaking because I got the lighting set up. I'm going through all this. So he tells me, he goes, oh, my style is I want to work the room. I want to go table to table, and I want to float freely. And I says, look, you can float freely, you can work the room, you can go all about your style. The only thing that's going to happen is all that stuff that you do is not going to end up in the film. So as soon as you go outside the zone, you're not in the film anymore. As soon as you stay in the range, whatever you do in the zone will actually make the film, because this is not like an E&G crew, like a reality TV crew that's going to follow you around the room. It's just not like that. We're producing an actual compelling, very cinematic film, and we really need you to kind of stay in this zone. So we're not chasing you around the room and drawing all kind of attention to ourselves. So what happened was, I instructed this guy so well that he basically became part of my team. Now, everybody that came up to give a speech, he was basically instructing them on all the things that I had instructed him, which is great. So I'll let you take a look at it so you'll see.
Okay, so it's not for me, really. It's for Aisha's. It's for Leaf's dad. So Leaf's dad is here. He's not going to give a speech now, but I've been told, come here, this is the sweet spot for lighting. So in the video for your son and your new daughter, you must stand right here. And let me show you something. This is about TV, right? So you'll feel it, right? Do you feel it right here? You're out of your light. But if you move back here, do you feel that? Do you feel that? Boom. You feel that?
That's awful. How can you work in that environment?
I'm sorry?
How can you work in this kind of environment?
There you go. So this is your light. So when you come up, when you give your speech, I want you to stand right here. Okay? Are we all with Leaf's dad? Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So as you can see, he became my messenger to the rest of the party. And that's what you want. But who's my sound tech? Jessica. Remember, actually, Jessica does, I'm realizing this now. Jessica actually does most of the work. I got a few messages during the break that were like, why isn't Jessica there at Creative Live? Why are you there? And one guy wrote, when you get back, you're going to change the name of the company to Jessica Roman Films. That was one of the messages I got. So I'm kind of realizing exactly how much she does. But she's my sound tech. She's actually going to instruct the people giving that speech. In this particular case, I wanted to kind of negotiate with this guy because she was having a little bit of difficulty because he did want to work the room a little bit. So I got in there, and I just wanted to emphasize that if they went off that zone, they just weren't going to be in the film. And that actually wasn't even our light. That was actually a lighting system that they had there, and they were actually able to direct it to the speech area. We're actually able to get with a lighting engineer and ask him if he can just direct that light over. So we didn't have to use our off-camera light, which was a great situation. So if you're at an event and they have elaborate lighting, generally they're going to have a lighting engineer that you can talk to, and you can say, now be careful, because a lot of times they'll direct these spotlights and it's just going to blow out your subject. So you have to tell them, say, listen, keep the intensity down to a reasonable level so it's not blowing out the subject, because what happens is if you have to expose for your subject and he's so blown out, everybody behind him is just going to be so underexposed that you're probably not going to even be able to see them. Yes?
Ray, if you don't have a mic stand or a podium, have you ever given a mark on the floor just with gaffer's tape?
I don't put the tape down, but generally I give them some type of visual reference of where to stand. I had a wedding recently, and I just sent a message to the planner that was involved, and I told her, I said, listen, if you want the speeches to look really good, it would be awesome if we had either a mic stand or a podium so they would just stay in one spot. And I explained all the lighting and the positioning and the zones and all this. And I never thought in a million years I would get this beautiful, see-through crystal podium for all the people to stand at. It was waiting for us at the wedding reception. So sometimes you just have to ask. The worst they can say is no. But in this particular case, I told the planner what was going to look the best, and they provided it. So it was a luxury, to have that there. But if I didn't ask for it, who knows what would have happened at that wedding. But now, everybody that came up to speak, they were pretty much just kind of planted behind this. Now we even set up a hair light. We had the key light. You have so many advantages to having that person in one spot But as soon as you have to worry about them kind of going outside the zone, now they're going outside the lighting that you've kind of pre-established. That type of thing. So we talked about the speeches. We've given instructions. And now you're going to have the people coming up to give the speeches. Now, what are the problems with the speeches, even though you have your main key light already set up and ready for the person actually giving the speech? Your couple is generally always sitting in the dark, right? Because we haven't thought about lighting for the couple. This is when I employ, and I'll get Joe to bring me maybe the LED light that's on the small light stand. And like I said, I have, my light stand's about a fraction of the size. It's very small. I use this torch LED light. This is very handy because I can move this anywhere. It's the power is self-contained, so I don't have to plug it in anywhere. And I can just have it off to one side. Whenever I need it, I can just employ it. So if the couple was sitting in the dark, I could just have this off to the side, and I could adjust the intensity accordingly as to how much light I needed to properly expose the couple. You don't need a lot of light because these cameras, again, as you saw during the ceremony, these cameras don't require a lot of light. They function very, very well in low light situations. So this light is very handy. One of the things that I always do as soon as I get to the wedding reception, as Jessica's setting up for audio, I set one of these up by the DJ speaker or the band speakers, along with a very small tripod and a DSLR on there with probably like a 24 to 70 lens. And I just leave it there the whole night because what happens is, and you guys have seen this, maybe a coordinator tells you, hey guys, you know, your dinner's in the back. And then you're in the back, and then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, they're telling you, oh my God, the bride's uncle's gonna stand up and give like a surprise speech, and nobody's prepared. Now you can come out, because I can just tell them, say, listen, give me 30 seconds. And in 30 seconds, I can come out, I can grab this light, put light where I need it, wherever they're gonna give the speech from, and I also have this camera that's very flexible because it has a 24 to 70 lens on there, and now I can kind of just position that, record until my main camera gets established on that primary shot. But this is a very safe shot, and it's very solid. You know, it's on an unmanned camera. You just frame it up, focus, and now I have a light to expose the shot, no matter where they are in the room. Hopefully, they're going to go to my zone where they were supposed to be giving speeches, but sometimes they just stand up at their table. Okay? Sometimes, hopefully, you're going to have a better control than that, but sometimes it's just so spontaneous that somebody wants to stand up and give a surprise speech, or maybe somebody stands up and they want to start singing. You know, maybe you guys have had that. We've had that, you know, with the bride's sister or something like that. They think they're a singer, so they want to sing at the wedding. And now you must be prepared. Sometimes at an Indian wedding, there's tons of performances and things like that. So maybe they just cut you on a break, and now they tell you, you know what, we're going to start a performance. The great thing about this safety camera is that it's got a 24 to 70 on there, a nice and wide lens, which in most cases you can cover the entire dance floor. And then, like I said, you already have a light on. And anything on the dance floor should already be exposed because, as we're going to talk about for the hands-on portion of the reception, we're going to have a light already covering the dance floor. So that part of it should already be set. This scenario here is really for surprise speeches. And that safety camera that we use, third camera, we use in case there's like a surprise performance, maybe the bride and groom, they're going to do this choreographed dance now. Anything, that safety camera is going to be able to cover. Even if it's got to go in a little bit tighter, you can punch it into 70 and kind of frame up your shot a little bit tighter. So let's talk about the couple. This is generally your couple during the speeches and the person actually giving the speech. Our key light is going to be on our speaker, and then I'm going to have one of these LED lights on the couple's reaction, because generally they are sitting in the dark. In fact, if you look at the people behind them, you can see they're a little bit underexposed, and that's kind of like what your couple would have been looking like on film. So this is your main speaker. This is the light that we're using for the main speaker, and I'm going to show you how we set this up in the live portion of reception training. And speeches and toast reactions, which is here. And you can see the lighting. The lighting's not flat. We don't have the light set up directly in front of them. We have it off coming in at an angle. And that sort of creates this dramatic lighting that you're seeing here. And again, this is the light that we're using for the reaction shots of the couple. We don't generally light the guests if we're getting cutaway shots or B-roll shots of the guests. We'll just kind of, or I will, since I'm kind of working my way around the room, I'll just manipulate the ISO and I'll add ISO if I need to. And here you can see what the lighting's doing. And the good thing about having the couple lit like this, I can shoot from anywhere in the room and the couple's gonna look great because they're already pre-lit. I can go anywhere in this room and get shots like this. And they're gonna look great. You get nice reactions, and this is what you're looking for because you have to complete the story. Okay. We're gonna get into this afterwards, but I want you to make a mental note of where the couple is sitting right now, because the couple is actually sitting in front of their sweetheart table, right? Instead of behind it. Because what happened was, if they sat at the sweetheart table where they were supposed to sit, they had centerpieces and candles and just high centerpieces where you really couldn't see their face. You just didn't have a clear vantage point of their faces. So what we did was, and I talked to them, always talk to the client just to let them know what you're doing. And I tell them, I'll go up to them, I said, listen, where you're sitting, do you see that high centerpiece just behind them? This is what was in front of their faces. So they couldn't even see the speeches. So I'll go to them and I tell them, I said, listen, just for the speeches, I'm gonna have you guys move to the front of the table so you have like a clear view of the person giving the speeches. And then once the speeches are over, we'll move your chairs back. Now, very important, don't make the bride and groom carry their own chairs. You know, you set the stage and don't allow for them to do any amount of work. Just your only function is to explain what's going on so they're not confused and wondering what the heck you're doing, moving their chairs and things like that. So in this case, you can see what happened. I moved their chairs and their sweetheart table is right behind them. And you can see that big centerpiece behind them. That's what would have been obstructing your view of the couple for getting reaction shots. So this is a static camera. Remember, if you have a static angle of something, if you have a static angle, and again, the tripod that we use for that is much smaller than this one. If you have a static camera, you don't really need anybody behind that camera because the composition is not changing, the focus is not changing, and really you're wasting manpower by having somebody behind this camera that could be mobile, getting you some nice B-roll shots of people in and around the reception. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of laughter, and you have to pay attention because sometimes you'll be there looking for cutaway shots. You can listen for good cutaway shots. A lot of times you'll hear the rowdy table where everybody's getting rowdy and loud and laughing and applauding and things like that. So you should be directing, as a B-roll person, you should be directing your camera that way. And like I said, you can bounce around and you can get content, right? 3 to 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. You're looking to create content. Here's some speeches here, and you'll see how we kind of bounce around the room looking for good cutaway shots. Good reactions, laughter, things that you can cut with the speeches. Good reactions here. You can even shoot this guy from afar, even though you're not the main angle. This is a static camera. So you can always cut back to the static camera or my B-roll camera. I'm floating around the room looking for emotions like this. You're bouncing around. Don't waste time. Don't get stuck behind a camera unless you're the primary shooter, which in this case, again, is Jessica. She's got the primary shot of the person giving the speeches, but believe it or not, I'm actually working here. I'm actually working the room looking for emotions and laughter and content. 3 to 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, looking for stuff that I can add to the film. So she's got the primary shot covered, she's got me covered, and now I'm working the room. I'm working, guys. Believe me, I work too, trust me. Remember, you're only as good as who? Your second shooter, or whoever your teammate is in this case. Okay, you have to be working. I couldn't be doing all this stuff if I didn't have a solid second shooter that was covering me for the speeches. Do we have any questions as far as reception coverage or lighting or anything?
Yeah. There was one of the reaction shots of the couple there. I saw a light in the background, and it looked like it might have been your Dito light. And that it may have been throwing past the couple onto the person who was giving the speech. Where would you choose to place your key light? Was that yours? And where do you choose to place your key light on the person giving the speech?
Yeah. So 2 things. First, you're going to have to try to plan it out and figure out where you could put a light, because they're going to have a lot of decor in the room. They're going to have a lot of tables. They're going to have the tables that they use that the wait staff uses for drinks and things like that. So they're going to have bartenders. They're going to have the bars set up and things like that. So a lot of times there might be the perfect spot for a light, but you can't put it there because there's something else there. And the other thing we're looking for with the Dito light is what? We need power. We need power, so we need an outlet. So that might be the perfect spot. We could put it there, and there's no power there. So you want to make sure that you bring extension cables in case you can use the extension cables. In a perfect world, I'd love to have the Ditto light in the back of the room, kind of throwing light forward towards the dance floor, because it's got so much throw. We're going to take a look at it for the live portion of the reception. The Ditto light's got a lot of throw. Now, if there's a band and the band's got its own lights, I will position the Ditto light right next to the band's lights, but my light's actually directed towards the dance floor, but it blends in very nicely with the band's light. I never want to do anything that's going to draw attention to the videographers. So as much as I can blend in my equipment with the environment, the better. That's how I kind of work that. Yeah.
So we had a question from M. Simmons, who asked if you would ever consider using a microphone stand for the toasts to ensure the toasters don't walk all around the room.
Yeah.
And then have a light set up as well.
Yeah, so we talked about that, is possibly having either a podium or a mic stand for the microphone. We don't bring our own mic stand, but a lot of times if there's a band there, generally they have a mic stand that you can pull down from the stage and use as a mic stand. So if we have that situation, we'll definitely use the mic stand, but we also ask for, like a podium and things like that. And generally, you don't have a mic stand and you don't have a podium, you basically just give instructions to who's ever given the speech just to kind of stay in a particular zone.
So you would never consider just arranging that so you have a stand and you say, if you're going to make the toast, always stand here. You would never just...
Like add a mic stand?
Just have it be part of your kit and just have it be part of your workflow all the time.
I have a mic stand. I bought a mic stand for that purpose, but we have so much gear right now that it's like to bring one more thing and then have them already have a mic stand at the reception is kind of, defeats the purpose a little bit of just lugging it around with us. So, but yeah, we do have a mic stand at home that I bought for that purpose, but most of the events that we're working, they have mic stands there. So I always love to have them either use the mic stand, like I said, or just request a podium that they can use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, quick one from Irish Eyes. Do you have any additional onboard camera lighting when you're working the room? Like, do you have something that's like just connected that you're kind of go to in case you find a dark corner?
No.
Okay.
No, I've never, for my B-roll camera, where I'm kind of floating around the room looking for cutaway shots, I never use an on-camera light. Because what happens, as soon as you employ an on-camera light and you turn it on, whoever you're trying to get reactions from, they just look at the light and they look at the camera. So it's not the reaction that I'm looking for. I just want them to be focused on the person giving the speech, and I want that natural reaction from my B-roll shots. So I never employ an on-camera light for that.
So I have a question from ISO Vision Studios, who wants to know, how do you keep yourself from changing shots too frequently? I feel like I'm always chasing a shot just to lose the one that I left. Is this something that comes with added confidence and experience? I feel like my footage has ADD.
Yeah, so a lot of times we're anticipating shots. Some of these shots where the people were laughing and clapping and being all animated, I was kind of just waiting. But once you have the shot, that's when you count off 3 to 5 seconds. I've got enough of this. Or if they're really being animated, you could stay there even longer. Things like that. If there's nothing else going on in the room, go with what you got. Because sometimes you look around the room and the people are just like, they're just bored, or they want to get back to first course and eat. They're not so interested in the speeches going on and things like that. So just keep scanning, look for something, and hopefully there's somebody in the room that's kind of interested in the words that are being spoken, at the speeches. But sometimes I've been to weddings where it was so loud with people in the reception room not even paying attention to the speeches, and they're just kind of like doing their own chitter chatter. So it gets a little bit challenging then. But you'll always be able to find at least a couple good cutaways during speeches, hopefully.
Ray, a question from Fashion TV, who one of our favorites around here, so thank you so much. Do you always shoot into flare for creative results during the receptions and the speeches? If you've done one, or do you create one with your lights? That backlighting, that flare?
Yeah, both. Sometimes it's already there because they've already got a lighting design in place. But sometimes our own lights give us that effect, of the flare or the hair lights, the nice rim lights and things like that. Sure, we love using that.
Yeah, it's just beautiful with the work.
It's
that you
beautiful
do.
lighting.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, the bad thing is that we can't plan for that stuff. We can only get to the reception, see what we have to work with, and kind of hope that we'll be able to position lights in a way where we'll get some of these creative effects that we're looking for. But sometimes it works out. Honestly, we just get lucky sometimes.
So Tyler Harrington Media asks, do you record the dances in full, or are you shooting for a sequence?
The dances for?
Like the bride and groom, do you
dance?
shoot the entire dance?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
And the bride and father?
We're going to get into a lot of what we do tomorrow during business, but remember this. If you're a photographer, you photograph everything, and why? We have photographers in here, right? Right. Why would you photograph absolutely everything at an event?
I mean, the main reason is to make sure you capture the entire story of the day.
Exactly.
So if you started at the beginning of the father-daughter dance, and you might think you've got a couple good shots, you never know once that song concludes if one of them is going to become overwhelmed with emotion or what could happen with it. So you want to be sure on those key moments to give full coverage and different angles to everything.
Exactly. But what else is it? What you're doing when you're filming and you're taking photographs? It's product. This is all product. Do you sell prints later on if they order copies?
Oh, definitely.
So what happens if you wouldn't have taken those photographs, those added random photographs?
That's a la carte money that's going down the drain.
You're losing money.
Yeah.
You're losing money because what happens? We're delivering a 20-minute film, but then what happens if they want to see the entire first dance? But you didn't record the entire first dance. You just took random shots for a 20-minute film. What's left to order? They can't order anything. So at this point, you're losing money because I said, can you just sell us like an edited version of the full speeches, first dances, ceremony, and all this? And you're like, well, I didn't really record the entire thing because I only needed to make up 20 minutes of film. So now what happened? You just lost some money. Same thing applies as it applies to photography. It applies to videography. This stuff that you're not recording is actual product that they may want. Sometimes they don't want it, but if they do want it, you want to be able to offer it as part of your a la carte or your extras.
Okay, Ray, we're going to take some ceremony questions.
Cool.
And I'm going to start with one from RK Torres. You mentioned that you do shoot Jewish and Indian weddings. Do you research all types of religious weddings before you go Greek weddings? I mean, I know they're all different, and if potentially you do you have a resource for how you did your training for that?
No. Here's the thing. We've done so many different types of ceremonies. We've done Greek ceremony, Persian ceremonies, Indian ceremonies, Pakistani ceremonies, Hindu ceremonies, Jewish ceremonies, Catholic ceremonies, Christian ceremonies, non-denominational ceremonies. Here's the thing with all of these ceremonies. The obvious is always, it's almost obvious what's the most important aspects of a ceremony. And in our case, we record everything anyways. And I tell you, the online community is so great because we've had so many weddings where, and probably some of you guys have seen this recently, where I've gone online and I says, can anybody help us translate, like a Greek ceremony, Persian ceremony, whatever the language, a Portuguese ceremony. And I tell you, I get so many messages, we can help you out. We can help you translate this. I've had Korean weddings where I needed to translate some stuff. And during the translation, I think I've even had Alex and Diana translate some stuff that I had from the Ukraine. So it's always great to kind of have that relationship with, you know, our fellow filmmakers online, because they've gotten me out of jam quite a few times. But even in doing translations with Alex and Diana about the Ukraine wedding, they were able to tell me, hey, this is really important, you know, for this wedding, and this is really important. If you didn't really know visually what was important, you at least had some colleagues that you can rely on to kind of help you through some of these weddings. Because for the most part, most of the weddings that we do, they're non-denominational, they're Christian, they're Catholic, they're Jewish, and I'm very familiar with those types of ceremonies. But once in a while, I end up in a different country that may have like a different type of religion where different things are more important than the next. So to help me better understand those situations, I'm just relying on really some colleagues that are maybe from that region or more familiar with that that culture and that religion than I am.
Right.
Cool. Yeah.
I saw the captions that you had on your video in the Brazil wedding.
Yeah.
Where you know, I thought that was really cool.
And I didn't translate that. That was somebody from Brazil that helped me translate all that over.
Yeah,
so,
that's nice.
like I said, it's definitely a great time to come into this industry, because there's so much interaction online now, and online groups and forums, and I tell you, every country and state that I've ever been to, I've always relied on having somebody from that country kind of help us out on the shoot, and it's always great to go online and just kind of put the feelers out to see who's out there.
Planet is getting smaller.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's kind of switching gears into gear, no pun intended. Quite a few people had asked about this earlier, and this is P587, plus a couple people wanted to know the focal length that you use your glide cam setup. And Photographics Miami wanted to know if you could demonstrate how to use the glide cam, like what lens and how do you maintain focus. Is that something that you want to cover?
I can go over it briefly.
That'd be great.
Yeah. You definitely want to use something a little bit wider for the most part on a glide cam. The most important thing for the glide cam or steady cam or whatever rig that you're using is what? The balance. If you don't have, if you haven't achieved proper balance, you're never going to achieve a proper shot. You know, your shot's always going to be off horizontal plane, and the shot's just never going to look good, and you're going to have to muscle it too much, and there's just going to be too much movement introduced into the shot that you don't want. I generally use either a Canon 14 lens, 2.8, or I'll use the new Canon version 2 24-70, and I'll probably be at 24. Sometimes, depending on the situation, I'll punch it in a little bit. Now, what's the problem with these cameras being on a glide cam like that, as opposed to being on a tripod?
If you do punch it in, you're changing the balance of the whole rig.
Exactly. So you're going to have to rebalance, number one. But the second challenge is trying to maintain focus, because now if I try to manipulate the focus ring, I'm basically throwing it off balance. So I can't do that. So what do? We pre-focus a lot. So a lot of these, all the ceremonies, if we're talking about a procession, I will pre-focus a distance. So I'll set my focal distance to maybe like 5 or 6 feet, because I'll know I'll be 5 or 6 feet away from the bridal party or the bride, and I'll just live with that. If I'm outside, I have a lot more flexibility, because I can even set the aperture to say like a 5.6, 6.3, give me a little bit more range. But if you're in a low lit indoor ceremony, you're going to have to shoot wide open, and you're really going to have to be mindful of the distance between you and your subject. If you predetermine that distance, you're going to have to be really mindful, or they're going to fall out of focus really quick.
Okay, back to the ceremony. Alex L. wanted to know if there was a huge window with a view, say, behind the officiant during the ceremony. How do you expose for that, or how do you get the bride and groom in focus when there's light pouring in behind them?
You just have to shoot at an angle, because if you shoot backlit, it's depending on the situation, it's never going to be a great situation, because everything behind they're probably underexposed, and everything behind them is very bright and overexposed. So, and you have to obviously expose for your officiant and the bride and the groom. So once you expose for them, you're going to even blow out the background even more. So depending on the situation, sometimes when you blow out the background in that situation, everything just turns white behind them. So that's not too bad of a situation, because that white just becomes like a canvas. So it just depends on what you're seeing visually on camera. But I would tell you, it's probably a better idea just to shoot in from an angle, so you're not getting that bright light coming from behind them.
Cool, thank you. Ray, do you have any advice? This is from Rococo Films. Do you have any advice for aspiring wedding photographers who want to follow in your footsteps, how to create a client base and start marketing when they don't quite have anything to show yet? Can they show off-topic films that they've made, or what would you advise?
If you don't have any work to show at all, it gets kind of tough. You know, you kind of start from the bottom up, almost like when I first started, I didn't have anything to show. So what happened? I would have to do maybe like a free wedding just to have some type of portfolio. So I don't even know that the client would trust him enough to document their wedding if they couldn't see something that he's done in the past, wedding related. It'd be very, very difficult. So I would almost get him to try to maybe do something for free. I mean, probably most of us in this room at some point have done something for free just to kind of build that portfolio, just to have something to sell.